We are your home theater and AV questions answered. This is AVRant. Want your home theater or AV question answered by Tom and Rob? Send it to question@avrant.com. Welcome to another edition of AVRant. I'm Tom Andrew, and I'm here with
Rob H. This is AVRant. It's your home theater and AV questions answered. I have kind of a like personal, not me personally, but family personal story that I think is I don't know. It's in my mind, so I wouldn't mind sharing. But I don't know if Tom has stories as well. We got quite a few questions to get through this week. So
do we?
Well, not many, but we have one that for sure could be very, very long.
Lots of thanks this week.
We can make it as long as we want to make it.
Scrolled down and saw that people aren't thanking us right now. So,
oh yeah,
maybe your stories are killing the enthusiasm for the podcast.
It could be that. I'm not particularly surprised that maybe some folks decided they're going to nope out of this podcast for a while. That's I'm not shocked if that happened, but we don't
we'll
really
welcome
know.
them back when they change their minds. Don't
yeah,
worry.
but
when they need our help, we will not judge them.
It's pretty typical that this week in the year is a little bit quieter because it's right after the Super Bowl. A lot of people have already done their home theater purchases if they were going to do some at the beginning of the year, and then holiday weekend that we just went past in both Canada and the U.S. It was a holiday weekend, so it's a little bit quieter week. Kind of good that we had some leftover from last week, but I don't know.
News. I have news for me.
There you go. Yeah. So why don't we do our personal stuff just briefly?
So a friend of mine, you guys may remember him from the very early days of videos at Audioholics, Andrew Gash.
Yes.
Who did our videos back then. He's gotten married recently.
Okay.
Congratulations.
Yes.
It wasn't like super recently.
Okay.
It was like in the last couple of years.
Oh, okay.
I'm not.
That's a little belated for congratulations, but
well,
all right. Yeah.
Whatever. And he... Now, I have no evidence of this one way or the other, but I just assume that this is how this conversation went. The conversation went, honey, I hate the acoustic treatments, getting rid of them. And he said, honey, I love you. Sure. And he put it up on Facebook that he was like, anybody want these things? I was like, I'll take them. So I went and picked them up. And I don't think the edges are straight on these guys. So
that's entirely possible. That can happen.
A little bit. So 2x2x4,
okay,
or 2x4x2. If you're thinking,
okay, so 2 inches thick 2 feet by 4 feet. Gotcha.
And they have these little French, like these really fancy metal French cleats to mount them to the wall. Of which I said immediately, I'm not doing that because there's a couple of reasons. Not the least of which is I'm living in an apartment, and the second most important one is that I don't have any tools.
I mean, you can make French cleats work with those 3M adhesive, you pull up and they don't leave any residue when you get rid of them, the hooks that go on there. Because, I mean, a hook can hold a French cleat, especially when it's temporary.
Yeah, so I didn't do that. So what I did instead was I went to the bike shop, borrowed a couple tools that I needed, and got like wire and D-rings for hanging pictures, attached those to the back of those, and then used those metal hook things that you just shove into the wall and then turn around.
The picture hangers can support quite a bit of weight, and they're very easy to
crazy.
mount.
Some of them are really
tiny little hole. You can pretty much cover the little hole that they leave with just paint. You don't even really have to spackle. You just put a little thing of paint over there, and it'll go over the hole.
So I picked them up on Saturday, hung them up on Sunday I think it was on Sunday with my wife. Put 2 in here so that it might sound a little bit better. This recording might sound a little bit less echoey. I wanted to put 3 in here, but the way the bed is set up, my wife doesn't want them hung over the bed in case they fall.
Okay.
But there's they've never fallen. And I've put heavier ones than this on these, and they've never, ever fallen. So I see no world where we would have to worry about that, but she's worried about it, so we didn't put any over the beds. And so there's 2 in here, there's 3 in another bedroom, and 1 in the hallway. So I'm going to thank Andrew Gash for passing those along to me.
Nice.
They're brownish.
Okay.
They're also somehow sun faded. So there's some of them are all the way brown, and the one right next to me has got these lighter spots. I don't know why they have lighter spots on them. So they've got the burlap like what we used to. We used to recommend to people before. We just said get speaker grill cloth.
Yeah.
Now that I don't know if you can do that anymore. Now that Joann's is closing. Joann's Fabrics is closing, but
which the burlap part of it or the speaker grill cloth?
The speaker grill part of it.
You can order that from like Parts Express. They have inexpensive good
I might have
speaker
to
grill cloth. Yeah.
My wife is not in love with the color. She's like, "Oh, they're so dark." And
fair enough.
I'm like, we can just get some white ones or something. I gotta put white cloth over it. Doesn't really matter. But so now I have more acoustic treatments in here, and I'm very happy. And if ever our friends over Herb over at Cross Spectrum Labs ever gets back to us, he's dealing with his own stuff, but we talked about maybe getting some acoustic panels over here as well. At some point, I'll have even more, but because believe me, this apartment cannot have too many. It is freaking loud in here. like I like to go in the bedrooms and just make my voice low so that it'll reverberate throughout the entire room. So it can.
You've discovered the frequency at which it reverberates. It's within the vocal range.
It is within the vocal range. Is definitely true. So we're also, of course, tentatively looking at houses and stuff for potential either layouts of houses for stuff. And I'm always like, well, this is where the home theater will go. She's
That's
like,
right.
Do we really need another home theater? I'm like,
come on now.
Let's not start this conversation again. We already did this. I already won this one. Because if not, I'm going to put a TV in every room. Right. That's going to be the other option. So yes, I have acoustic panels now. And
okay.
I'm pleased with it. So thank you, Andrew Gash.
Very nice. Well, my personal story has nothing to do with home theater. Although, well, I guess there's a tiny little bit of home electronics related into it. But you might have heard my story back around after Christmas time, New Year's time. I was talking about my aunt who had ended up in the hospital for a while. And I mean, I know there are some folks who are a little bit unfamiliar with, but interested in sort of the Canadian healthcare system. There might be some people who are looking north of the border and wondering how things might work up here. I've seen a little bit of that sentiment going around for various and sundry reasons. Yes, but there are always the criticisms of, socialized medicine, our universal healthcare system up here in Canada. And so I just wanted to sort of relay a little bit of the tale that we've gone through because, I mean, there definitely are like major pluses and major minuses that we've gone through. So just going back for about the past 2 years, my family and I have been sort of gauging how this one of my aunts, I have several aunts who are all getting older now, but one of my aunts has been doing, she's been living in a retirement home. So we basically have 3 sort of levels of housing for older folks that we have. I'm summarizing, simplifying a bit, but we basically have independent living, which is there's no on-site staff medical support around at all. Anything that is medical, it has to come into the building. You can hire your own people. You can go through the health ministry and have healthcare providers who will come and visit. You can, hire people to stay with you, but all of that is on your own. Then we have assisted living, which is there are people on site who can help with medical things, but not on a constant basis. This is assistance, right? You need a little bit of help here and there. There's at least someone in the building that you can call on. And then we have residential care, what would colloquially be known as a care home or an old age home, where there are people around constantly. So we sort of have, that's simplifying it, but we basically have those 3 levels. And then you can, in Canada, choose to go to assisted living or residential care and just pay full fare. Just pay your way, private paying. And if you have an income still in your old age that is over a certain amount, then you are basically forced to do that. There is no government assistance help money-wise if you're making over a certain amount still. But if you are making, less than that, then we have a graduated subsidy scale. So if you're making the least amount to the point that you are not paying any income tax, then what they do is take a look at whatever amount of money you are making in your year. 80% of that goes to your residential care costs, and you keep the other 20%. The residential care provides all meals, cleaning, everything like that. So you really don't have any other costs that are going into that.
It's just 20%.
And then outside of that,
other stuff with,
That's right. Yeah, that's just your own, and you can continue to save some money that way. But the 80%, that can be a relatively small amount of money every month, depending on how much you're making, and the rest is subsidized entirely. So for the past 2 years, my family has been like, my aunt really kind of needs to go towards, at the very least, assisted living, but we were really thinking residential care. But she is in the lowest tax bracket. She doesn't actually pay any income tax, and it would need to be subsidized. The cost for residential care is about $10,000 to $12,000 a month if you're just paying full freight. It is not inexpensive. And people might be thinking, okay, a woman who is at the time 2 years ago 92 years old, how much longer is she really going to last? We can probably afford $10,000 to $12,000 a month for a while. Well, folks in the women in my family on my mother's side, they live to be 105, 106. That's kind of been typical. So it's like, we got another 10 to 12 years that we're looking at here.
Living that long out of spite.
So we have been in touch with our health, our home health, because they have to do evaluations to see what you qualify for, where they can get you in, what you qualify for subsidy-wise. And so, yes, it has been a lot of waiting. To get the evaluation is like a 3-month wait. In the meantime, conditions can change, and then they do the evaluation, but they're seeing the person at one point in time on one day. And if they're in a not too bad condition, they're like, they don't qualify for that yet. And so that's where the frustration comes in, right? When you're waiting for these things. And that's where people who are, bigger fans of, everybody just pay their own way. It's like, there's the less waiting time when it's involved, but at the same time, it's like, well, out-of-pocket costs are severely different when you're talking just paying full freight versus having the subsidy. So my aunt ended up in the hospital twice, close to Christmas time and then in the new year. And it meant that finally, like right out of hospital, they're like, okay, it's time for residential care. We can't have her continuing to end up stuck on the floor, falling down. And they actually provided temporarily, until we were waiting for a residential care bed to open up, a subsidized bed to open up, they actually provided a relatively new program, which was somebody was with my aunt 24 hours a day, temporarily, where she was living, which is kind of insane, one-on-one.
Seems like also a lot of money.
A tremendous amount of money. But what that does is it really lights a fire under the rest of the system. And it was like, within 9 days, they're like, we found a bed for her. Now, the thing was, when you're doing this subsidy, you get no choice of where that bed is. It could be anywhere within the healthcare region. We divide things up regionally, and it's a big region that my aunt and I live in. It could have been, couple hours away, potentially. But it turned out to be a place that was like right in our not exactly local neighborhood, but very, very reasonable driving distance. So we're not worried about trying to get her on another waiting list and move to another area. So upshot being that basically when they tell you, hey, the bed is available, you got 24 hours. Move yourself in. That's if you don't, then you lose it. So it's like, you got to be ready to go. Now, of course, you can bring other belongings afterwards and that, but that's the dichotomy of the system that we're dealing with. It's like, well, you're waiting for 3 months to get an evaluation. You're waiting 2 years until somebody finally says that, you finally qualify. And then when it becomes available, like you, the patient, now have 24 hours to get yourself over here and moved in. And if you don't, you lose your spot.
Jeez.
So it's like that's
hands on deck.
That's what I and my family were dealing with last week. I wasn't doing a whole lot of home theater stuff, but yes, to bring it back around to sort of the AV side of things. So, first of all, my aunt has said, you know what? It's been better than she expected over the weekend. She's quite happy where she is. It's a nice building that she's in. She's at the moment in a shared room because that's the first that became available, but she automatically gets the first, single bed room that eventually opens up there. And like we say, we're not looking to move her to a completely different building anymore because we're happy with the location. But as far as television, telephone, internet service, strangely enough, they have like shared services. There is like a shared Wi-Fi that everybody can get on. They have the television rooms that everybody can come in and watch and share. But if you want your own private television in your own room right by your bed, if you want your own private telephone, if you want your own private internet, then that's optional. And so we're like, she actually makes use of her computer quite a bit. She does have the TV on in her room quite often, sort of just for company type of thing. So moving all of that over, what a process that was. It was like, in her retirement home, those services were like part of her rent. So it's like getting it detached from the group rate that was in her retirement home building to staying with the same company, but getting it her own service, but that is then within a residential care building, which is not the same as coming to a private residence, and like arranging the times because they have to have the maintenance manager at the building who has to be with the person the entire time. It's just like, it was wild. That doing those services was every bit as much of a headache as all the medical side of things.
Oh, sure.
So, I haven't moved all of the furniture out of her old place yet, but I have until the end of the month because the rent is already paid up for that. So, yeah, I've been busy. My aunt has been busy. My whole family has been busy. So if I'm a little distracted and haven't done as much research this week, that is the explanation for why. But yeah, just to give you an idea, other than one taxi ride, and a little bit of the rent lost because we paid up till the end of the month already, and that type of stuff. Zero other out-of-pocket costs. Okay, so here's the major upside: no insurance to deal with, no calls on that front. Yes, it's like long wait periods followed by mad rushes, but also essentially zero out-of-pocket costs. And she's still keeping 20% of the amount that she makes. So it's like, well, you got to weigh the cost benefit, right? It's not that it's 100% upside, but it's also not 100% downside either. No system is perfect, but we kind of enjoy the no out-of-pocket cost side of things. So there you go. That's my tale.
I heard a couple of people on the bike ride arguing about socialized medicine versus American medicine, and every one of us hears stories about something we know about really well. And that one story that somebody has that is intriguing is almost always like the super duper outlier.
Okay.
And that's what happens with these conversations about medicine. Like I have been, obviously you live in socialized medicine.
Yes.
So that you always have. So you only know, no offense, socialized medicine.
That's right.
I have lived in America and have had American medicine, and I have lived in Australia for 2.5 years and had socialized medicine. And from a functional standpoint, from how you get things done, it doesn't feel significantly different.
Okay.
Except for the amount of basically insurance you pay.
Right.
You pay a bunch of insurance, and then you also have to pay for other things. The cost of co-pays and stuff like that. In the socialized medicine, you're like, oh, well, there's, you're always waiting and take years and they would only, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, if you're really sick, if something's really wrong with you,
yes,
they're like, well, we're not going to just watch you die. So we're going to take care of you.
If anything with my aunt's situation had been life-threatening, it would have been a totally different story. I mean, when she was getting stuck on the floor a couple times, it wasn't like she was like falling over, smacking, and potentially breaking something. This was more like she would kind of slide down the side of her bed sometimes or something like that. Or she still can't stand a mess, so she would try to pick up, a little scrap or a little crumb off the floor or something like that, and she would end up just can't stand back up on her own power. So this, but I mean, if there was anything life-threatening, it would have been much, much, much faster. I mean, that's part of the reason we were waiting so long.
And there's plenty of stories about the U.S. medical system where people are put on lists or asked to wait or ignored by their doctors or, not treated properly. There's plenty of that as well. So
pretty much worldwide, if you've got oodles and oodles and oodles of money,
it doesn't make
things go a little bit easier.
There's private hospitals in Australia as well. There's hospitals. There's like the general hospitals everybody goes to, or the whatever, and then there's the private hospital, which is just you walk in with a stack of cash and say, "Fix me," and they're like, "Yes."
In Canada, we don't have any private hospitals. We don't have any privatized healthcare that way. We have rejected the two-tier system, which has been floated many times by multiple political parties in Canada, the idea of a two-tiered system, and we have rejected that. We have never gone for that in this country, and who knows, one day we might, and I personally lean that hopefully we don't. But on these other matters, when it comes to where you're living and that, there's more privatized choice that is available. So it's...
And honestly, I've never been to one of those privatized hospitals. I've just been told by Australians that they exist. So
sure,
take that with a grain of salt. But to wholesale reject another idea from another country that you've had no experience with simply because someone on the news told you it's terrible, or it has associated with a word that you've been told is terrible, is silly, because I've experienced both of them. And I went to doctors when I needed to, and I didn't have any problems. I didn't have to wait for hours and hours.
Right.
And my son, had he swallowed a coin and it got stuck in his throat. He went to the doctor, and they took him. The hospital took him right in. Took care of him immediately. It was like no real big deal, and it wasn't like they were like, "Well, I'm sorry, son, you're 54th in line, and you'll just have to try not to die." No, that's not what happens.
I mean, I will say, like, I feel what was key in having a positive outcome with what I've gone through, and there's, I've dealt things with, like I say, I have other aunts who are also elderly, and I'm going through things with them as well. Sort of the key is, on a personal level, keeping organized is kind of vital, kind of critical, because when things are moving along, it's like, it goes really quick. You're waiting, and then it goes really quick. And it's like, if you don't have your questions prepared, because they will answer your questions, but they will not always think to answer questions that you haven't asked. I mean, that's been my experience anyway. And it's like, if you don't have yourself kind of organized, ready to go, so that when the opportunity comes, you can sort of like knock down the things on your checklist, get the questions answered that you need answered. It's like having all of that prepared was really key. And that makes it go a lot more smoothly. And it's like, well, that's probably a little unfair to expect people to do that. But at the same time, it's like, if you work with the system, yes, it feels like you're jumping through hoops at certain points. Yes, it feels like you're waiting for things at some points. But if you do sort of like keep calm, keep patient, keep organized, it's like, the outcome in this case was really, really good.
So if you want to like get a analogy to that for the United States. Anyone who's ever been to a dermatologist in this country will tell you that if you do not have a list of questions ready, that dermatologist is not waiting around. They're not going to hold your hand. They're like, look at you, boom, boom, boom. Okay, got any questions? No? Bye. I have never had a dermatologist that did not feel like they were having an IBS attack in the middle of talking to me. They were getting out of that room as soon as possible. So, I maybe you're like, well, my dermatologist says, blah, blah, blah. I've never met a dermatologist that wasn't in a huge rush. I mean, they are quantity over quality, definitely. They are like, every one of you customers is that much closer to my next boat payment.
Right.
So we're getting this thing done. The guy who did the surgery on my leg for my ACL was the same way. He's very good. He's a very good doctor, but Jesus, that man was in a rush. And so don't be like, oh, that sounds terrible. When they take your time. No, they don't. Shut up. And I've had terrible doctors here too. I had one doctor, and I didn't figure this out till recently. He kept ordering cardiac things for me, heart things. I've had ultrasounds. I've had all sorts of tests done, where they've done things to me. And I didn't figure out till recently why that is. It's because I have a new doctor. Because I stopped going to this guy because I was like, man, what the hell's wrong with you? I am fine. Like, I've never had a problem. Like, my heart rate has always been good. Like, since I was a kid. Like, my dad's got problems. My brother's got problems. My sister's got problems.
Okay. So family history then.
We have a family history of it, but my is 120 over 80 is it's like I'm always right there. Well, ever since I started exercising a lot, I've had problems with these doctors who are like, they take my blood pressure and they're like, oh, something's weird there. They write down these crazy numbers. I'm like, what are you talking about? And I went to my doctor, who is Socialized. It's a socialized medicine doctor because my wife works for government, and the government has they're like, it's a lot cheaper for us to just provide you a doctor that you go to than it is to help pay for your insurance, because it's cheaper for us to do that, and you stay healthier and you go more often. And
that's the side of it. It's when you're not worried about the out-of-pocket costs, maybe you do a little bit more prevention than emergency care. That is part of the argument for sure.
So I go to this doctor, and because they're like not getting paid by the patient, they're like happy to spend a little time talking to you, right? So you sit down and he's like, or I think it was she. There's a couple of them there, and I think she said, "Oh yeah, we have to do your blood pressure by hand because it always comes up wrong on the machine." I'm like, what are you talking about? They're like, "Yeah, the machine doesn't take resting heart rates and blood pressures as low as yours is naturally because of how much you exercise." Like I go cycling, and I was watching my heart rate yesterday when I was cycling, and I was sitting at a stop sign. It was like, I don't know, 153 or something like that. I don't know. It was something like that. I was like, oh, that seems high. And then I started cycling, and it immediately dropped. Like it dropped to like 142 or something. I'm like, oh, that's weird. So that's what they told me. They said that your heart rate or your blood pressure is so low naturally that it messes up the machine and it can't count it right and it spits out erroneous numbers. So we have to do it by hand.
Yeah.
I'm like, that's why that guy kept sending me to the doctor. I mean, to do all these cardiac things because he thought there was something wrong with my heart because it was getting all kind of weird numbers. And I was like, my blood pressure is high because you're stressing me out, dude. I don't understand what to tell you. Like, I've never had problems. So all that to say, it doesn't make any difference if you're in America or if you're in an American system or a socialized system. You can still get a doctor who reads things wrong or makes you wait or does these other things. And I will tell you that the lack of stress I have from my wife's socialized medicine doctor that we go to, the ability to just call them and say, you know what, I haven't seen you in a while, and I kind of want to talk about like some niggling things that are bothering me, and not having to worry about going in there and paying anything, and just going there and like not waiting until something breaks. It's like your car. Like if you could take your car to the mechanic whenever you wanted, and they would just look at it and not charge you and just say,
prevention is a good thing.
We'll put some cleaner in this, and we tuned up that a little bit. We changed out the spark plugs, and don't worry about it. It's all covered. You would do it. And your car would last so much longer. That is the hope. So, but all right. So at least we're not getting political this week. So
sure,
that's nice.
Yeah.
That's nice for us.
Look at that.
Look at that. So what did you watch, Rob?
All right. I did not watch anything because I played something this week. This is a game called Thank Goodness You're Here, with an exclamation point, which is officially part of the title. This was developed by a two-man team in the UK. Their company name is Coal Supper. They're up in northern England there, and so published by the company Panic, which was the same publisher as the Untitled Goose Game. And if you're familiar at all with the Untitled Goose Game, Thank Goodness You're Here is somewhat similar. It's got a sort of similar playstyle where you have these sort of little areas that your character walks around in sort of isometric overhead views or slightly overhead view, walking around the area,
like
and then. Yeah, as you complete little tasks, that will open up an avenue to another little area that you enter, and then you spend some time there, and it opens up another little area. So this basically cost about the same as a movie ticket, and you could go through this game in about the same time as a movie. I took a little bit longer because I wanted to make sure I knocked on every door and went into every place and caught every little bit of dialogue. But even still, it was like maybe a 2 hour and 45 minutes that I spent with this, and it definitely doesn't require that you take that long. I was just being very thorough. Now, your little character is a small little man with a lemon for a head, and you have, aside from being able to walk around, two other controls. You can jump, or you can, and this is the word for it, smack. And those are the only two things you can do, which means that every problem in town can be solved by either jumping or smacking it. And so you pretty much jump and smack everything that you come across. And this is what you do in Thank Goodness You're Here. The idea is you've gone to a new town to talk to the mayor there. I can't remember if they said why you need to talk to the mayor of this other town. But when you arrive, the mayor is not ready to see you. And there is actually a secret ending to this game if you do exactly what the receptionist said. Now, everything in the game is telling you not to do exactly what the receptionist says, because otherwise you would be doing very, very little. And so you naturally go out the door and start solving people's problems. But if you do exactly what the receptionist said, there's actually a secret ending to this game, which is quite hilarious. Also, you have your choice of which language you put things into. You must choose the dialect option. If you choose anything else, you are totally missing out on this game because you have to hear the Northern English dialect that they're speaking. That is critical to this game because this is a comedy game at its heart. And all in the story and the dialogue. So the idea is you just kind of end up, repetition is what makes this game funny. You repeat going through the various areas that you open up. You repeat seeing the characters that are in those areas, or you see the same character who has now gone to a new area of the game. And repetition is what's funny here. And you kind of get to know the townsfolk by going through and solving little problems as you're going along. And so you get into the little interpersonal relationships. There's two characters who are sisters that you don't know immediately are sisters, but you find out they're sisters. And then there's a boy that one of them likes, and you see their little story that's going on there. And there's a fellow who's always going around and getting his arm stuck in various things because he can't keep his arm out of things. And you're always solving these little problems. And as you would imagine in a very small Northern England town, much of life revolves around the pub and the chippy and the place where you get the meat pies. So the chippy is the fish and chips.
I was going to say, I was trying to figure out what the chippy was. Yeah. Yes. All right. I got it. Yes.
And so you're just kind of going around to these places and you're solving little problems as they come up. But things get more and more absurd and more bizarre as you go along, and even gets a little bit psychedelic at one point. And everybody in this town is obsessed with size. Mostly that they don't like when things are too big. That's sort of the main problem. They don't like when things are too big. And so you, this tiny little man with a lemon for a head, you are very small. And so they're like, oh, thank goodness you're here. You can solve this problem because you're so small. And then the game goes beyond that because it's like, well, you're so small that you can like fit inside someone's mouth. Why not? Which you clearly cannot, but the game's just like, sure, that's how small you are. So let's just do that for a while. You can go down this drain pipe. You're so small. It's like, you clearly are not, but let's just do it because we're a video game. So yeah, it's a fun little game. It could be a movie. It's that type of length. It's that type of experience. It is funny. It is charming. It is very easy to play. So I highly recommend. Thank goodness you're here. Like I say, it costs about the same as a movie ticket. So why not check it out? It's on PlayStation platforms, Switch, and PC. It is for some reason not on Xbox platforms, as far as I can tell. And honestly, I played it on Switch, but you might want to check it out on PlayStation because Switch doesn't have achievements, and some of the humor is in the achievement. I looked up the achievements after. Like, for example, there is one character that you come across who very clearly has their rear end protruding, and like I said, you can either jump or smack things, and so you can tell what you're supposed to do with this protruding rear end. And there is an achievement for, yes, activating that every opportunity you get. And if you miss an opportunity, you don't get that achievement. So it's very important that you see that type of thing.
Very important. I actually watched something this week. Not all of it, but part of it. So I'm going to have to talk about it simply because I have not watched anything in so long. So my wife wanted to start watching a movie the other night.
Yes.
It was Valentine's Day, wasn't it? Since the last
last Friday there. Yeah. February 14th. Yeah.
That's not when we watched it.
Okay.
This is immaterial. So I guess we should have done some sort of Valentine's Day thing. But my wife does not celebrate Valentine's Day, never has.
Okay.
We've been married for a long time thing. It's just she doesn't care.
All right.
My wife is an engineer. Let's remember that. And she doesn't subscribe or exhibit all the tropes of engineers, but enough of them that she fits right in. And one of them is...
Explain to me the beneficial logical purpose of Valentine's Day, and it's had to come up with a reason. All right, yeah.
She doesn't really do... I mean, she cares about her birthday, I think, is about the only one that she cares about. Like Christmas, we're like, we don't really do gifts that much for each other. We kind of got everything.
Buy what you need when you need it. All right.
Yeah. Okay. But on top of that, like anniversaries and stuff, we might go out to dinner, but it's really just an excuse to go out to dinner and we're not actually celebrating. Like I have a friend who's only been married a couple of years and it shows, but she's like, she records like the first time when they met anniversary and their first kiss anniversary and their wedding anniversary and their 6-month wedding anniversary. I'm like, you have lost your damn mind. I'm not keeping track of all that. And I'm certainly not buying stuff for all of it. Yep. That's for sure. But we decided to, and by we, I mean, she said, can we watch Inside Out too? I'm like, yeah, we've got Disney Plus. So we started watching it. And we got about halfway through it before she was like, listen, I'm getting tired. Let's turn this thing off. I'm enjoying it, but I don't want to.
Yeah, so it wasn't that she wanted to turn the movie off because she didn't like it. It was just
she was loving it, but needed. She was like, I could tell I'm starting to
fade.
Yeah. So let's just turn
save the rest for later. Yeah.
And but she really liked is he Sloth? Is it Sloth? Who's the lazy one? The big one with the
Ennui.
No, that's Ennui is. I know who Ennui is.
Yes.
The big guy with the big nose.
Embarrassment?
Yes. She loved Embarrassment.
Okay. Yeah, fair enough.
I was like, so one of the criticisms I've heard of this movie is that many of these other emotions that show up, only one of them, of course, anxiety, is really steals the show and the rest of them are just kind of there.
Yeah.
And I've heard that criticism, but it was funny to me that my wife was like, in the middle, just exclaimed, "Oh, I love that one.
Yeah.
I love that one." I was like,
well, he is cute.
He is very cute. And, Embarrassment kind of saves the day. Like the ones that we've seen, that like things are going horribly, and the Embarrassment just goes, and presses it and presses the console, and
mainly because it kind of makes Riley shut up for a second. Many of her problems are just talking too much.
So we are very much liking it. I loved the first Inside Out. Yeah. Movies like that, and we could say this about so many movies, Indiana Jones, even really to a large extent the first Star Wars movie, and so many other things. Matrix, when something comes along that really blows you away, the sequel it just can't. Right. It can't do it. It can't be as good.
This is a really good sequel, though.
But we are really liking it so far. So I don't necessarily know that we needed so many new emotions. I think that just anxiety by itself showing up is enough to throw the big monkey wrench.
Well, it's because of what takes place at the beginning of the movie. They didn't kind of want that to be the only person left inside of headquarters there. So that's kind of why you have the new crew, old crew dichotomy going on there. But yeah, you haven't gotten to the big sort of emotional gut punch and this movie does have one, as you can easily predict.
I can imagine.
You haven't gotten there yet. It is good. It works. It is one though that I will say on a technical side of things. I know you don't really have the ability to do this right now, but when you can have the music swelling in the background, when you can have the sound effect that's going on in that full theater experience, it does enhance that moment for sure, because they make use of the audio to great effect when that moment comes, for sure.
I just don't understand why Disney seems to be the only consistent person to use music and story together so well. You're like, oh, Christopher Nolan. Like, he's definitely about the music, but when you're sitting there, you can't understand what anybody's saying.
Sure.
It's kind of hard
long
to get
stretches of droning sounds in those Hans Zimmer soundtracks for sure. Yep. I mean, obviously, anything with John Williams music in it is the other one there, where the music. Yeah. But to the point that the music almost takes over, and it's like without that music, it's not nearly as effective.
Right. All right, so yes, I will report back when we have finished the movie, which will hopefully be this week. We will see. There's a lot of stuff going on, as you can imagine. Nothing really exciting to report about the house, except that we need a survey of the property, and we can't get any surveyors to call us back because they're all very busy.
Well, let's crack on then. We've spent a heck of a lot of time at the top of this podcast, but why not? I'm not the only one who's been talking. I think if we actually broke down how many words and the length of time, yours is slightly exceeded mine, honestly.
I don't know. I feel like that my own personal bias can't admit that that's true. This is AVRant, the podcast that answers your home theater and AV questions. Get your questions answered. All you do is ask by emailing us at question@avrant.com. You come to our website, find our shows or show notes, our links to the products and articles that we will be referencing, and a link to the Flickr album so you can follow along with the images. And there will be some this time.
There shall.
Yes. There shall be. When we get to Eric's question, there's going to be a stupid amount of it.
If we get there at this point now, yeah.
At this
we'll
point,
see.
Yes. Facebook.com/AVRant podcast, YouTube.com/AVRant. The pictures will be integrated into that, so you can just glance over as you're listening to the podcast. Contact us directly, rob@avrant.com. His socials ask first reflect. I'm Tom at avrant.com. I don't have socials. I don't do the socials anymore.
That's right.
Thank our listeners of the week. To become a listener of the week, support the podcast in some way. One of the ways you can do that is go to avrant.com, click on the Buy Us a Cup of Coffee link, and send us a PayPal donation. Or you can go to patreon.com/8WeRant podcast to become a monthly contributor. We currently have 133 patrons over at patreon.com, and we thank every single one of you.
That is right. Once again, that is patreon.com/AVRant podcast if you'd like to sign up to make an automatic monthly donation. So a big thank you to our 133 patrons over there. That's been holding very steady, surprisingly. So, that's great. Thank you very much.
I need more coffee. So we also got to a note of gratitude for keeping the podcast going.
There's a change.
There's a change. Usually we have a big long list of people. Not this week.
Nope.
So to be the spotlight this week is on Stefan. Stefan, who sent us a note of gratitude. Thank you, Stefan. It is your week.
It sure is. That even came in on Monday. I had to make an exception to include it because I was like, it's a little strange to have 0 names there. So thank you, Stefan. You made the
No one
list.
appreciates us. That's right. We're not going to answer any more of your damn questions. How about that? How about that? In the news, Netflix was briefly and inadvertently available to be connected to some users' Apple TV app accounts in the U.S. over the weekend. Netflix has confirmed that the rollout was not supposed to happen yet, and if you go looking for it now, it's no longer available. But for a short while, you could add certain Netflix shows to your Apple TV Watchlist and access them in the Apple TV Continue Watching section directly without having to exit the Apple TV app and open the Netflix app on your own. Back in 2018, Netflix co-founder Reed Hastings declared they would not integrate with Apple TV or other universal search platforms because we prefer, quote, we prefer to have our customers watch our content in our service app, end quote. But clearly time has passed. I mean, it was 2018. It's been
That's right.
years. And stances are changing, and this inadvertent temporary rollout of Netflix integration to the Apple TV app indicates that, one, it is clearly possible on the technical level, and two, Sonos claims that their forthcoming Pinewood streaming box and HDMI switch will have universal search that includes Netflix is not so far-fetched after all, like we mentioned last week. So there you go.
Yeah, that was kind of the my major thought there, because I was like, are they really, is Sonos really going to be able to pull off this universal search that they're talking about? And it's like, well, it certainly appears that behind the scenes, Netflix is starting to make partnerships and plans to get their service included in these universal search, universal watch list types of services. The notion that this isn't ever going to show up in the Apple TV Plus app now is there's no chance that it's not happening at some point. Just I don't know why it rolled out inadvertently. I think it was to get a little bit of we accidentally leaked it out there. Free press, right? Why pay for advertising when you can just have the tech press cover it for you for free by accidentally leaking it out. But yeah, the other thing was they did mention while it was active, if you did a search, it was a Netflix show. First of all, the only ones that showed up were Netflix originals. Anything that was licensed content in Netflix was not showing up in the universal search if it was on the Netflix service, but Netflix originals were showing up in the universal search. And then if you clicked on it, if you were on an actual Apple TV 4K device, then clicking on the show within the Apple TV search would automatically launch the Netflix app on the Apple TV 4K and take you straight to that show. But if you were doing the universal search within the Apple TV app, but on someone else's device, then it was not automatically launching and going straight to the show for you. It would show up in the universal search and tell you that you needed to go to the Netflix app to watch it, but it wasn't automatically launching. So we'll see how it all plays out when it actually officially launches. But that's good news for Sonos as far as I'm concerned. It's good news for Apple TV app users. And that'll be coming at some point. We don't know when, but clearly it's on its way.
Yeah, I think Netflix is just looking for new forms of revenue, and they got to keep. There is no, we're doing great, everybody's making money, let's just keep going. They got to always increase that bottom line, and I think that's what's happening here. Is that they're like, well, we have a very strong stance on this until we need more money, in which case we have a very flexible stance on this. NVIDIA sent out a new firmware update, version 9.2. for all NVIDIA Shield devices. Is mostly bug fixes, and the Shield remains on Android 11. 15 is the current release version, and 16 beta is available now on phones. But some significant changes are also included. I think we reported on this on AV Gadgets as well. I think
that's entirely possible. Yep.
First up, after you've updated to firmware version 9.2, your NVIDIA Shield will be removed from any Google Home integrations. We definitely reported on this because Andrew said this.
Yeah.
You'll have to visit NVIDIA support page to reconfigure anything to do with Google Home, so be aware of that. Next, the feature everybody has been clamoring for, NVIDIA Shield can now output Auro 3D.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm not going to ever update this. And most importantly is improved support for frame rate switching, but don't get too terribly excited. You still have to manually select match frame rate beta for every single video you watch every single time, and heaven help you if an ad interrupts your video, because if the ad uses a different frame rate than the video, it can mess up your signal, and it still doesn't work for every streaming video app, but the major ones like Netflix, Disney Plus, and Amazon Video Prime seem to work all right, so better than nothing. I would never update this.
I mean, if you're integrated with Google Home, that is a hassle for sure.
It's
not that it does not work with Google Home whatsoever. It's just that, yeah, if it was already integrated, like it just removes it from anything that you had already programmed, and you have to put it all back in again. So that's a pretty big hassle if you had it integrated with Google Home. If you didn't, then not so bad.
We'll get to the questions here. And like we said, we're going to try to save Eric's questions for the end of the show, but we'll see because it's very long. Dave. Dave is a welder and fabricator by trade. He used those skills to make his own racing sim setup. I went to a friend's house the other day, a guy I cycle with, who is, I guess he used to race karts or something back in the day.
Sure.
And him and his brother are super into this stuff.
Yeah.
And it's so interesting to me how somebody who very clearly would not consider themselves a gamer will build something like this, and it costs a lot of money.
It is not super cheap. I mean, he built his own. You can buy rigs, and they are not cheap. So, yeah.
And they spend tens of thousands of dollars on these things, but if you say, you like to play video games? No,
a simulation, Tom. It's not a game. It's a simulation.
He said they got into it during COVID because
Sure.
And I guess a lot of the racers were doing the sims as well.
Makes sense. Well,
the actual ones. Anyways.
All professional racers do a lot of simulation training now. There's no question about that. Yeah.
So anyways, this is Dave. He's a welder. He built his own. He only ever uses his PS5 to play a couple different racing games on this rig, and he wants to keep it all very simple and as cheap as possible. Good luck with that. He's also using his Vizio TV that provides either HDMI ARC or optical audio output. The PS5 is plugged directly into the TV to support as many advanced video features as possible. The TV's optical out feeds an old Yamaha AV receiver, and that powers just a pair of old KLH speakers and a small sub. He isn't looking to make any upgrades there unless a new AV receiver is necessary in order to do the upgrades he wants. He liked to add some tactile transducer. He just wants inexpensive bass shakers. Okay, I'm getting irritated with this question, and it's not because of this question. It's because of so many other questions I have to deal with on the regular. So let's get through it, and then I will
Tom is distracted for some reason.
The cheapest possible is his goal.
Okay.
So, does he need to buy a new AV receiver with dedicated tactile transducer output? Is it only possible to get good tactile transducer output for racing sims by using a PC instead of a PS5? Okay. So, nobody wants the cheapest thing. Okay, let's just start there.
Well,
nobody wants the cheapest thing. Okay, what they say they want is the cheapest thing. What they want is a very good thing, but they want to pay the cheapest price as if it weren't a very good thing. Okay, so I get this a lot in the bike shop. Oh, how much you want to spend on a bike? $100. You cannot spend. Well, I bought a bike for $100 and it was great. First of all, no, it wasn't. It was crap. And second of all, it was 30 years ago.
Yeah,
and that was a lot more money.
And would have to be used.
Also, you're not remembering it correctly. I guarantee you that, because that's not how your brain works. So I get irritated with questions that spend the entire time trying to convince you that they don't actually don't have any money to spend when they clearly do. I mean, I'm looking at this room, I'm looking at this setup, I'm looking at that chair. and I'm the TV, everything. I'm like, you clearly have money that you want to spend on this. So stop trying to convince us that you don't, because you do. And not only that, if we literally told you this is the cheapest thing, this is as crappy as it gets, this is how you could do this for the least amount of money, and you actually went and did it, you would not be happy with us.
Well,
because you'd be like, it doesn't work well. We're like, you did not say.
I mean, I've got different price points I'm going to mention.
But you did not go for the absolute crappiest thing, did you? You didn't like say, "Oh, you can go to
crappiest."
But that would be the absolute cheapest, which is what he's asking for.
Sure.
You are already considering a level of quality that's okay.
I am considering
for you.
a level of quality, yes, for sure.
And that's not what they're asking for. What they really want is, I have a level of quality in my brain that I am willing to accept, but I'm not going to tell you. I'm not going to tell you what that is. Because you're going to have to guess. and then when you tell me a price, which is, like, let's say, somebody comes in, I want to spend the cheapest possible on a road bike for a triathlon. All right, $7,000. There you go. That's the cheapest price that you get for a worthy triathlon bike that's even used for that. Well, I don't want to spend that. I wanted to spend $150. Okay, well then you didn't actually want the thing that you said.
Okay.
So that's a little like aside from me, basically saying you're setting everybody up for failure by asking the question in this way, and not just for us, but in anything that you're going shopping for. So what you really want is something that works well, but will not break whatever imaginary bank you have. And that's fine. We've got no problems with that, but it would be better if you phrased your question in the form of, this is what I really want to experience.
Right.
This is how I want to experience, and this is my budget. Can I get there? And
I've had to take 2 different tracks on my recommendations because I don't know exactly the experience that you're going for.
Exactly. So if I'm going to actually ask the question correctly, we would be able to give.
Let's not be mean.
I'm not being mean. I'm not being mean. But this is common for consumers who are afraid that we are going to come up with some crazy. First of all, you've never listened to the podcast. That we're going to come up with some crazy number, and I had to.
Well, there's a very distinct difference in the price points between the things I'm going to recommend. Yeah.
So, basically, as far as your experience in this racing sim goes, do you have to upgrade your AV receiver? Do you have to upgrade your TV? Do you have to upgrade all these things? What you're really looking for is a system that shakes you a little bit to give you more of that road feel, to give you more of that bass experience, and that's fine. I mean, they make them, and I've seen them where the chair turns and it's all
this
articulated.
isn't the whole hydraulic system. We're not getting into that.
Yeah,
obviously.
Clearly you don't want that, which is fine. I understand that those things are crazy money. But I would say, and this is I know you only ask for bass shakers, but I would say that if you're going for a racing sim and you're excluding, as you have here, surround sound. Even a simple 4-point system, with some speakers to your sides and or a little bit behind you in this thing, feels to me like you're really leaving a lot of realism on the table.
And with
there.
a Yamaha AV receiver, he didn't say it was a stereo receiver, so that was an AV receiver. So I'm thinking that, a 4.0 audio setup should definitely be doable. And that doesn't require going to like a new level of HDMI or anything like that, because you can do 4 points. I mean, you'll be sending out 5.1 signal, and it'll just be creating the phantom center for you, which is perfectly fine, because we know you have one seat that you care about in this setup. This isn't one where I'm like, is the center speaker going to be necessary for the people who are sitting off axis? No, I mean, but a 4-speaker setup would be great in here, so I agree with that. Now, when I'm getting into, there's basically 2 completely different levels that you might be going for. And when you're saying you want the least expensive, then it's clearly going to track towards one, but I'm also going to describe sort of the least expensive for the other level that you might be going for. Because what you have here is a situation where you could just split the subwoofer output that you have. We already know you're feeding one small subwoofer, so that's that literally a Y cable, a splitter, still going to the small subwoofer that you have, and then the other end of the Y splitter goes to a separate amplifier, and that amplifier's job is to power one or more tactile transducers. Now, what's going on there is that it is just duplicating what the subwoofer is playing out of a tactile transducer that you could bolt or strap to this simulation rig that you've built. So it is just vibrating your rig along with the bass that is being fed to your subwoofer. That's going to include the dedicated LFE signal, and then it is also going to be whatever bass managed bass was coming from your, in this case, just front, left, and right channels, if they have been sent to small.
I hope they have.
And it's it's just so it's sending the bass, the same bass that's going to your subwoofer is going to the tactile transducer. Now, most of the tactile transducers, the amplifier that you would use to power them, have their own crossover dial. So that means that if, like, let's say, because these are fairly small KLH speakers that you've been using, let's say the crossover frequency was up at 120 hertz or 150 hertz, not out of the question. You might, if you completely just duplicated that with the tactile transducer, say, oh, it's actually vibrating at frequencies that are too high. It's just not pleasant.
It doesn't feel right. Yeah, but you could. This is one of those times where. Because so the new AV receivers from Denon have their tactile transducer output, which sends it out, without any EQ.
Yeah.
And normally we would recommend something like that for a home theater because your room correction is going to EQ your LFE signal subwoofer, and all the subwoofer signal for the subwoofers. And then if you send that to the tactile transducers, you're going to get
linear response out of the tactile transducer anymore. Some vibrations are stronger and some are weaker than they should be because it was EQing the sound out of the subwoofer. In this case, I doubt you're EQing it.
If you are EQing it, stop.
Just
turn off whatever room, and then I would have no problems with you doing this. And like Rob's saying, you might adjust the crossover. Normally, we would defeat the crossover on your subwoofers because you want the AV receiver to do it for you. But in your case, you may want to engage the crossover so that you are limiting some of those higher frequencies.
Just on the amplifier for the tactile transducer, you're saying, okay, give me the tactile sensation up to 75 hertz, but not above that. So you use the amplifier that is dedicated for the tactile transducer to do that. So that's a reasonably simple setup. And before I get to the actual recommendations on the products, I just wanted to describe it. So that's what it's going to be. It's going to be duplicating the bass frequencies that are already going to your subwoofer. You wouldn't have to buy anything else. You would just need to buy the bass shakers and the amplifier to drive them and a Y splitter for your subwoofer output. Very simple, very inexpensive, and it's duplicating that bass. Now, the other way to go is like a 4 corners system. So you have 4 tactile transducers. This is like the step down from the hydraulic system that is physically moving your seat around, on hydraulic presses. This is, you have 4 tactile transducers, 1 in each corner of your rig. And ideally, then you would be using a PC. This is where that question came from. You would be using a PC because those systems don't just duplicate the bass that's going to the subwoofer signal. They actually have programming that connects to the video game software and gets the telemetry data. There's the telemetry data for the simulation of the car within the video game and uses that telemetry data to create tactile signals that get fed to the 4 corners of your rig. And they're supposed to simulate the sensation of each individual tire. So as you're cornering, you get different sensations, from each corner of your rig when you go into that. So as you can imagine, that is a completely different kettle of fish that we're dealing with there and a completely different price point. So I'm going to start there. I'm kind of working my way down. Now, if you want sort of the least expensive of this 4-corner system, well, that's going to be from the Butt Kicker, that company. They have their Gamer Plus 4 corners kit that goes for $1,100. So $1,100, that's about the least expensive you can do for this sort of system. Now, this includes pretty much everything that you need. It's got the 4 Gamer Plus tactile transducers, which are not particularly large, but looking at the rig that you built, like there are some rigs that look like they weigh about 3,000 pounds, and this wouldn't be suitable for that. You've clearly, you have fabricated this yourself, but this looks like fairly thin metal most of the way around, and this system would work great for that. The Gamer Plus system would be perfect for that. It includes everything you do. It includes the amplifier. It actually has 4 separate amplifiers, 1 amplifier for each of those tactile transducers, because in the system, and they include the software, it's their Haptic Connect software, which you have to pay game by game to get the specific software hooks for the game. But you said there's really only 2 games that you play. It's $5 per game. So they include the Haptic Connect software, but then it'd be $5 for each additional game. Not a crazy amount there. And then they have these pegs that you could either weld or otherwise connect to your rig, and that's what the tactile transducers clamp onto. Mm-hmm. So that's a system there, $1,100 plus $10 for the 2 games that you said you wanted for the software. Now, there is the larger Butt Kicker Gamer Pro. This is the same thing, but just with larger tactile transducers that go in there. Not really necessarily
one seat. I mean, I don't really know that you need.
But like I say, so there's like the 3,000 pound rigs that some people have, which really should be on the hydraulic presses, but they're kind of quote unquote cheaping out at that point. So yeah, you got the Haptic Connect software. You've got the option of the Gamer Pro, which goes for $1,320 instead of $1,100. But that's sort of what you're looking at there. So the step down from there, I'm just showing on screen here just some of the games that are supported there. So you got an idea what's in the Haptic Connect software. Now, you could stick with the Butt Kicker as the company, but going the other route that I described, where you're just duplicating what's going on in that subwoofer channel. If you do that, I would then recommend, if you're getting just a single one of these tactile transducers, to just directly duplicate what's going on with your subwoofer output. I would then choose the Butt Kicker Gamer Pro. If you're just going to have one attached to your rig, then you want the larger one. So $350, that includes the amplifier to drive it, but it doesn't have
I didn't see that.
Yeah, it doesn't have the Haptic Connect software, because now you don't have the 4 corners, you don't need the telemetry data. This is just duplicating what your subwoofer is outputting. But $350 is the solution from Butt Kicker. Butt Kicker is my personal favorite for tactile transducers. It is an actual just like metal piston suspended in a magnetic field that is vibrating up and down, and it does a really good job. What I like about the butt kickers is that they can be subtle, which is not always the case with a lot of the other voice coil based bass shakers. A lot of those really are just like vibration motors. That's what they feel like, whereas the Butt Kicker can have subtlety to it because it is a full on like 3-pound piston suspended in a magnetic field that's going up and down, and I like them a lot. But if that price point is too high, or there's an alternative here, because you could still have left versus right. What you could choose to do is set up that you eliminate the dedicated subwoofer output, or you do the double bass setting on your Yamaha, and you actually set the left and right to full range, because then you could output separate left and right signals to one of these bass shaker things and have 2 tactile transducers, one on the left of your rig and one on the right of your rig. And that'll give you a little bit of difference when there is something that is only in the left channel and something that is only in the right channel. Because here we're not talking about subwoofer bass, where we don't like doing the stereo bass idea. Here we're talking about you could have bass rumbling that's happening only in the left channel, and you could have bass rumbling that's only happening in the right channel, and you can separate the physical sensation of that with a 2 bass shaker solution. So Dayton Audio has some great solutions here from Parts Express. One of them you can get for $375. That includes an amplifier that can drive both and Dayton's own bass shakers. They can also do a 4 bass shaker solution, but you won't have quadrant steering when you do this. This is just giving you more tactile transducers, and the price on that is actually kind of a good deal. It's $415 to add 2 more bass shakers. The amplifier that Dayton sells is capable of powering all of those just from the 1 amp, and it has its own crossover knob that's built into it. If you want the absolute least expensive, there is another solution from Dayton for $250 with a lower wattage amplifier that really can only drive 2 of those bass shakers, not 4 of them, but it still has a crossover knob on the back. So $250 is the absolute cheapest I could go. That can actually give you left versus right sort of stereo separation there. But yeah, that's just duplicating what's going to the subwoofer.
I have a hard time believing that steering, this shaking, makes a real... I'm not saying that you couldn't feel the difference, but I just, especially with one seat, it's just one chair. It just feels like it would go through the whole thing. You're really going to be able to tell the difference other than it making some sort of sound that helps you locate it. I think I would just buy one, slap it on there, call it a day.
That is entirely a reasonable solution if what you want to do is duplicate what the subwoofer is getting. Yes.
Yeah, that's kind of what I would do, but that's just me. John has been using a 2019 NVIDIA Shield, the cylinder-based shaped base model. He wants to upgrade. He feels like the shielded model is starting to show its age. Did you know that there's an upgrade that will break everything?
There is a new update. It doesn't break everything. Just Google Home. It just breaks Google Home.
He's considering the current Apple TV 4K, upgrading to the Shield Pro, or getting the latest Roku Ultra. I would get the Apple TV over the Roku, but that's just my personal preference.
That is the quick answer.
Yeah. And I don't know that the Shield Pro is going to make you feel like you had an upgrade that much.
It's the same processor in there. It's got more RAM, but it's the same processor. Yeah.
Do any of them support VRR and ALLM or
variable refresh rate and auto low latency mode?
God, I haven't spoken those things out loud in so long, my brain locked up. He'll be hooking up to a TCL R635 TV and wants to take a full advantage of all of its video features.
So I wanted to just say here, because VRR and ALLM, they are gaming features for sure. Now, the NVIDIA Shield can play games. It can also do the NVIDIA Shield streaming where you have a dedicated PC connected to your network, and then the NVIDIA Shield just acts as a little, front end for a TV in a different room, and it'll stream the game from your own gaming PC to the NVIDIA Shield and play it back that way. So that he could really be asking about those things. That's not out of the question if he's using it for gaming purposes. The short answer is no. None of them support VRR and ALLM in those ways. But then furthermore, I've seen this quite a bit, especially on Reddit, just sort of floating around, where people are confusing and conflating variable refresh rate with switching frame rates for video streaming services, because they have an obvious similarity, but they are not the same thing. Variable refresh rate is, I have a gaming PC or I have a gaming console. Its graphics card, if I don't lock it to a specific frame rate, like 30 frames per second or 60 frames per second at all times, if it's an unlocked frame rate, that means the frame rate is varying from moment to moment. At one moment, you're getting 45 frames per second. At another moment, you're getting 100 frames per second. And a variable refresh rate display will sync up with that and change its frame rate on the fly as your graphics processor is changing. And so sometimes, you're like, well, I want the highest frame rate possible. I want 144 hertz. And it's like, well, my GPU can do that at moments in this game, but at other moments it dips down. It just doesn't have the processing power to keep up with that at all the time, and it dips down to 90 at some points. Variable refresh rate keeps that in sync at all times. That doesn't happen with video streaming. With video streaming, we can have different frame rates. We can have 24 frames per second, we can have 30 frames per second, 60 frames per second, but the video stream will be locked to that particular frame rate. It won't be varying up and down from moment to moment. But you can have, like in the instance of, all of these streaming services are showing you ads now, unless you pay for the highest tier. When the ads come in, the ads might be at 30 frames per second, and then the movie you're watching is at 24. And it is switching back and forth. And we talked about in the news how the NVIDIA Shield, with this match frame rate beta that they're still going, it's improved now, but you still have to manually select that button for each and every video that when you start it. And then when an ad comes in, if the ad's at a different frame rate, that can mess up the signal. It can crash the app, even with the update that's going on. So if what you were talking about was matching the frame rate, the Apple TV 4K is the best solution for matching the frame rate. If you want the frame rate of the incoming video signal to be output at the same as what the original signal was, to change automatically when it changes in the video signal, to sync up when a YouTube video changes frame rate, when an ad comes in and it changes frame rate, to do that automatically without having to manually push a button or have the apps crash on you when it happens, the Apple TV 4K is absolutely the solution there. But if you really were talking about video games, none of the streaming boxes are doing VRR or ALLM for video games. You will just pick a frame rate and it will stick at that.
What are the pluses and minuses of each of the streaming boxes? So You've already dealt with the NVIDIA Shield, which
Yes.
means that you are familiar with the ecosystem within, or the UX, or the IU or UI or whatever they're calling it these days. They keep changing the acronym for me. But you're used to how that works. So when I started using the Roku for a while, and I have used it at my in-laws' place when we were there after the hurricanes, and because they have Rokus in like every room, and I don't like it. I just don't. I don't like the Roku's UI. I just don't like the interface. I don't like how it lays things out. I don't like how it doesn't remember where I what apps I've been using and suggest those. They're always in the same order. I just don't like it. The NVIDIA Shield I have not used, so I cannot comment on it. But I have used the Apple TV 4K, and I like that one a lot better. Yeah. It's a cleaner interface. It shows the last couple
ads on the interface itself, which is nice.
It shows the last couple of apps you've used, and then below that there's just a big block of all the apps you've decided. It's a
grid of all your apps, without ads.
And it doesn't, like with the Roku, it feels like everything's shoved over in the corner.
Sure.
And you have to scroll. You almost or invariably have to scroll down to find something. Whereas
they need the bigger space on the top right for ads.
Yeah, and the left is the menu, which seems it takes up way too much real estate, in my opinion. So I like the Apple TV 4K one myself. It just was cleaner. It was easier to navigate. It was easier for my family to navigate.
And the frame rate matching thing that you are clearly interested in to some degree, it is by far the best solution on that one.
So that would be the big plus or minus. Like Rob said, for me, it's UX more than anything else. Having the interface be something that makes sense to me and it doesn't stress me out to try to find stuff is the big
benefit. My recommendation is, my default answer is Apple TV 4K. There's one reason to choose the Roku over the Apple TV 4K, and that is that you are all in on Roku's own dedicated app. You have to have the Roku app. Well, then you're going to get a Roku. That is the one and only reason that I would get it instead of an Apple TV 4K. For the NVIDIA Shield is a little bit different. It has the NVIDIA game streaming thing. You want to do that? You have a dedicated gaming PC and you want to do that? Well, you're better off with an NVIDIA Shield to do the game streaming. The other one is Plex. If you are big time into Plex, the NVIDIA Shield is definitely still the best choice there, because the Apple TV 4K is not going to give you bitstream output for Dolby True HD, DTS HD Master Audio, or the Dolby True HD version of Atmos, or the DTS HD Master Audio version of DTS-X from discs that you have backed up, and that's what you're playing back in Plex. On the Apple TV 4K, if you use the regular Apple TV playback or the Plex playback, that is going to be taken down to a non-Atmos version or a non-DTS-X version. If you use the Infuse app, you can get lossless out, you can get Dolby True HD out, you can get DTS HD Master Audio out, but not the Atmos extensions or not the DTS-X extensions attached to them. So if you want the full support of disc-based audio, you're playing disc backups in Plex, the NVIDIA Shield is definitely still the best choice there. Also, if you want your NVIDIA Shield to act as a Plex server, that is where you would need the NVIDIA Shield Pro. The tube-shaped basic version can't act as a Plex server on its own, but the Pro version can. So you can have your NVIDIA Shield Pro, that's the device that's on and attached to your network at all times, and it's acting as your server for Plex. So that's another feature that the Apple TV 4K cannot replicate. So there could be very legitimate reasons to stick with NVIDIA Shield for Plex specifically, or for the NVIDIA streaming, the gaming. But if not, if those two things are not big deals to you, then get an Apple TV 4K instead.
There you go. Can any or all of these streaming boxes be set to always output an HDR signal regardless of the original video signal?
Yes, all of them can.
I was going to say, sometimes you don't even have a choice. It's just going to make you they want to have HDR.
But you can definitely manually set that for all of them. Yeah.
So which one is the most responsive? That's what's bugging him most about his current Shield.
The Apple TV
4K. Yeah. Not only is it most responsive, it's just you can get to things fastest.
That's right.
You know?
And the apps launch faster, and it remembers where you were, and
Yes. the Peacock app sucks. So, but I don't think it has anything to do with the Apple TV 4K.
No, that's across all devices. That's not the device's fault.
Apple TV, the Peacock app is just atrocious. Eliezer had to laugh when Tom joked about being married for a while first while keeping two separate homes and only moving in together after figuring out if the marriage was going to stick. Doesn't sound like me. I don't know what he's talking about. He and his wife are both healthcare professionals, and they met while traveling together for work. They dated for 2 years and were married for 3 while they were still away from home. So they did have separate houses, and his wife only sold hers and moved in with him after they returned from their 5 years of work travel together. Tom would approve. Yes? Sure. I don't know. It's interesting. People have such interesting lives.
Yeah.
You know, you're like, what is normal for one person is, you know, how their life went. And you're just looking like, are you insane? Why did you do that? Like, why did you do that? So I have that. People have that reaction to when I tell them about how my wife and I have traveled all over the world and done things. And they're like, oh. I was just telling somebody the other day, like when we decide that we're going to go travel someplace in the United States, just drive. We'll start driving, and then, you know, we're like, well, where are we going to stay tonight?
Right.
We'll figure it out. We just Airbnb that thing. Just figure it out. I remember when we had a layover in London on our way back from Turkey when we went with the family a couple summers. Was it last summer or the summer before? And we were on the tarmac. We just landed in London at whatever airport we were. And my wife was on the Airbnb website trying to find us someplace to sleep that night. I was just going to imagine the kind of like panic attacks that would set off in other people. And I'm just like, we'll figure it out.
That would not go well with my sister. She needs the everything planned down a year in advance. Yeah.
Yes. Anyways, to comment about about his Roku Ultra only outputting stereo audio, Rob figured that Roku must have been plugged into the TV, which was then down converting the sound to stereo before sending it to the AV receiver. But the Roku was actually plugged into the receiver. The culprit was the volume mode setting in the Roku. Changing that from auto to off got surround sound working. So there you go.
Yep. Yeah,
we
a
fixed
little bit
it.
strange, but yeah, no, but that's like the dynamic range compression that's built into the Roku. So turning that off is a good idea anyway.
Yeah, there you go. With no option to get a second subwoofer into the room, he's still fiddling with his lone subwoofer a bit. Where can he get those bass sweeps we always recommend using? And I recommend, if you ever read any of my articles on AV gadgets that talk about bass sweeps, I always recommend going to audiocheck.net.
That's right.
Because they're free and you can kind of customize your
That's what I like most. You can generate your own sweep. You can put in your parameters, the duration, whether it's sweeping from low frequency to high or high frequency to low. You can put in the little clicks every 10 hertz, which is very useful if you're trying to, by ear, decide where frequencies are going up and where they're going down in the frequency response. It can help you keep track by just counting the clicks. So yeah, lots of lovely things in the sweep generator over at audiocheck.net. I never mind repeating that and putting the link in for fresh new listeners.
Right. He went ahead and changed the crossover frequency. I didn't skip anything. Did I?
No.
Okay. He went ahead and changed the crossover frequency for all 5 of his speakers to 80 hertz since his room corrections program set them to a lower crossover frequency by default. He then noticed the LPF or LFE setting and set that to 120 hertz. Is that the recommended setting?
Yes.
It is.
Why is that sitting there? It shouldn't exist.
It should, It should not exist. Let's just start with that.
They shouldn't let you change it.
And not only that, the default should be 120. If it's anything other than 120, it's weird.
That's right.
So yes, if it doesn't say reset or if it says anything other than 120, you should set it to 120. I have an article on AV Gadgets about it and why it's that way. It has everything to do with. I don't know why this setting exists.
Well, it's legacy thing. It's a whole legacy thing that some people wanted that setting and they've just never dared to take it away. But
just get rid of this stuff.
LPF4LFE stands for low pass filter for low frequency effects, and it really does only apply to that dedicated 0.1 low frequency effects channel. This setting has no bearing on the bass management. It does nothing to touch any of the bass that was moved from any of your speaker channels into the subwoofer output. It doesn't touch that, which is why you don't need to change it from the 120 hertz setting. It is strictly for the dedicated 0.1 low frequency effects channel. And the reason you would never change it is because if any sound mixer for the movie or TV show or game that you're viewing decided to put a 100 hertz sound into the dedicated low frequency effects channel, that sound is now quieter than the mixer intended if you change the low pass filter for the dedicated low frequency effects channel. That channel can go up to 200 hertz, but it naturally rolls off at 120. That is an industry standard. Everybody deals with it. All mixers are aware of it and use it that way. And if they want to put a sound into that dedicated LFE channel, just let them do it. They clearly wanted it there. And yeah, the reason why the setting existed was back in the day before we had like the discrete channel stuff, people felt that, I could get a better blend between my subwoofer and my main speakers that I left set to large if I filled with the, both the high pass and the low pass filters, and they just never dared to take it away. But that should just be locked at 120. You shouldn't be able to change it and leave it alone.
No. M.R. So it must be their initials or something. Or they just like to be called Mr. That's a band, by the way, I think. Yeah, Mr. Okay. What are our opinions of the Ascend Acoustics Sierra ELX tower speakers with raw ribbon tweeters? We actually never talk about Ascend on this podcast, so this is a good question to come up. Priced at $5,300 a pair, they are $1,700 more than the $3,600 a pair Sierra Tower V2 with RAW. So how do those compare? And then compared to other $5,000 to $5,500 a pair speakers out there, how do they stack up? Also, which color should he choose if he were to get them? Now,
that last one is funny to me because I'm like,
yes.
How can we be on the hook for that choice?
I don't know. I would get the bamboo ones because I like the way bamboo looks. I would like the bamboo finished ones. Personally, that is my only contribution to this. I'm going to go get more coffee.
Okay.
And while Rob answers this in excruciating detail,
sure.
I will say though that the only color choice that is correct is the raw bamboo. That is it.
Okay.
Everything else is putting lipstick on a hog. You just leave the hog alone. It was pretty to begin with. It didn't need the lipstick, as far as I'm concerned.
So, I mean, that's fair enough if the bare bamboo look works for you. Now, it is natural wood. It is laminated bamboo, so it's going to have unique individual grain to it. They do a very nice job over at Ascend of trying to have it match as closely as possible because, I mean, as you have different crops of bamboo that are being used, the exact tint and tinge and color of it can be slightly different, but they do a nice job of matching it over there. But yes, on the color front, if you do go with the satin cherry or the what is the other finish? Satin espresso, which is darker. You do still see the wood grain if you get up close to it. Then there is the piano black. So if you want black, the only standard option is a piano black finish. So it is very, very, very glossy, mirror-like finish on that. So I don't really recommend that if you have, like, say, a projector set up and the speakers are going to be slightly in front of your projection screen. It is a mirror-like finish, and you're going to get light reflections off of that piano black finish. Ascend can also do custom finishes, though it does cost extra, but they can do custom finishes if you wanted something other than that. They used to offer a satin black bamboo finish that actually was my personal favorite because it didn't have the mirror-like finish and you could still see the wood grain if you got up close to it. But yeah, those are my personal preferences there. I would probably choose the satin espresso finish personally. If I were going with one of the standard finish options, because it is sort of the darkest, you can still sort of see the black grain to it, but it's got a little bit more interest to it than just plain black, and it's not the mirror-like finish. But in terms of, yes, comparing it to the standard Sierra Tower V2 with the Rowell Ribbon Tweeter, so obviously part of the price is they have replaced both of the bass woofers in that design with the considerably more expensive LX woofers. The LX woofers can play quite a bit lower, a good 3/4 of an octave lower in frequency response versus the standard woofers that are in the Sierra Towers, and they can play louder and they have higher power handling. So it is about getting speakers that can play louder and lower. That is like the most obvious objective difference between the ELX towers and the standard Sierra towers. Then they have also replaced the dedicated mid-range driver with the EX driver, which again is partially just matching the output capabilities, but Ascend David Fabricant will also claim that it has slightly faster transient response, although the dedicated mid-range driver in the Sierra tower is a tremendously good dedicated mid-range driver. And then clearly the tweeters are actually the same. So if you just totaled up the driver costs, it doesn't quite cover the $1,700 difference between the ELX and the standard Sierra towers. But part of that is that they do hand select the cabinets for the ELX towers. So there's a little bit more extra care and attention paid to that, and the cabinet costs are part of where that's coming in as well. So then, compared to other $5,000 to $5,500 tower speakers, I mean, I think they are a tremendous value. I think they outperform a lot of what else you could get at this price point. The profit margins that Ascend charges are considerably lower than a lot of others. It's like he basically charges about a 30% profit margin and then doesn't have a retail store markup. Right. So you're getting cost plus about 30%, which is crazy low in the speaker industry. It's wildly low in the speaker industry. If these speakers were priced at $12,000 a pair and they were like buying them in store, that is by no means out of line for the quality of the components, for the cabinets that's going in here. He could probably charge considerably more than $12,000, but like if you were just going cost times two, then that's about where you end up. So I think they're a tremendous value up there. Their output capabilities, their sensitivity are stack up really well. They can play louder, they can play lower, and tremendous value there. So whether you should get the ELX versus the standard Sierra towers, to me, that's predominantly about room size and seating distance. If you're going to be in the 10 to 14 foot seating distance range. And keep in mind, that's seating distance, okay? Because very often, like your tower speakers are not going to be embedded in your front wall, most likely. So the actual seating distance from the front of those speakers to your seats, if you're in the 10 to 14 foot range, I would stick with the regular Sierra towers. It's only if you're getting 15 feet or more away from them, which you might be. People have rooms like that. If you're getting 15 feet away or more, then I'd get the ELX. Otherwise, I'd save the money. I'd stick with the Sierra towers.
So I think I've talked about this before in the podcast, but it's been a while. I remember being at CES one year, or CD, I don't remember which, and one of the people I was talking to at the time, they were a dealer, like an installer / dealer, and I said to them, "Hey, I was just talking to the speaker company over here. They said that their speakers have 50 points." I said, I don't know what that means. What does that mean? He goes, that means I got to go talk to him. And he ran off. Okay. 50 points is their MSRP, the price that you sell them at is 50% higher than what the dealer is going to have to pay for them. And that's, while great for the dealer, not necessarily so good for everybody else. And certainly I don't begrudge anybody for making money, but that's the sort of thing that you have to realize is going on. And it's not just within this industry, it's within every industry. You know, there's a markup at every step as things come across. So if you just looked at the price of the components of any given product, you're like, wow, it either is... I could build it. If I knew how to do it, I could build it myself for less, which is kind of what it looks like in the home theater industry. But you're not taking into account the difficulty of doing everything. And in the bike industry, it's actually the opposite. If you bought the frame and the different components separately, it would cost more because the components themselves are sold at such a discount to the manufacturers that you couldn't put a bike together for the price that you can buy one. Like I can get I think Linsky had a sale recently on titanium frame bikes with electronic shifting and hydraulic brakes, disc brakes. That was like $3,000, $3,500 for that. And I'm like, the group set alone, just the cranks and the shifting is over $2,000 by itself, not including the frame or the handlebars or anything else. Just the shifting, just the drivetrain is going to will cost you $2,600 or more, depending on which one you get. So, looking at the individual parts and saying, "Hey, I could get this for this could be sold in a store for $12,000, but you can get it for $5,300 from directly from Ascend," is just shows you that that's what online sales is supposed to be.
But Ascend's profit margins are unusually low for the speaker industry. Which is one of the reasons I love them. The money you're paying is going to component cost and performance, and not a ton to marketing and markups. It's like very, very.
That's
little.
why we never talk about them on this podcast because they don't pay us to talk about them.
Dave stays in business
do.
because he does so much himself and stays up till 3 a.m. every morning. That's the only reason that company has stayed in business. It is a founder, owner run company, and the other person who does everything is his wife. So that's how they've done it.
Infinite Gary. Gary said he was going to start watching the BBC show Humans right after he finished Obi-Wan Kenobi, but he decided to roll straight into Ahsoka instead. He's liking it so far. Seems to be well executed. And while he still does most of his movie watching in his dedicated home theater with his 92-inch Stewart projection screen using his Runco projector, he found the HDR presentation of Ahsoka on his Panasonic OLED to be worth switching over to one of the smaller setups, a visual delight. Since he was using an Apple TV 4K to stream Disney Plus in both setups, that gave him the experience of using the Apple TV 4K connected to his Anthem D2V Pre-Pro in his main theater and connected to his Lexicon MC10 Pre-Pro in his Panasonic OLED setup. And he noticed a strange quirk. The Apple TV 4K remote seems to control volume up and down perfectly fine in either setup, but the mute button only worked with the Lexicon, not with the Anthem. Do we have any idea what could cause this discrepancy? Why would the mute button on the Apple TV 4K remote not function when connected to its Anthem Pre-Pro?
Good old CEC, HDMI CEC. Either
that's what you'd have to use to make this work anyway. So yeah,
by default, something in Anthem's programming just didn't quite line up with the standards for the mute button to work automatically and properly right out of the gate with HDMI CEC. I can't tell you exactly what went wrong with the code, but that's what it is. It's an HDMI CEC fault in there, and something Anthem didn't quite adhere to the standard, because Apple is pretty darn good about following the standard on CEC. So I'm going to blame Anthem on that one for that not quite working. Something in the programming wasn't quite right there, but there is a workaround. There is a solution. If you want to spend just a little bit of time, one of our friends, one of our AVRant listeners, Jeremy Pyle, he has his own more popular than our YouTube channel, Tech Enthusiasm. So he put up a full tutorial on how to get this working. So your Apple TV 4K remote, because that is what Gary was using, it actually does have a little IR blaster on the front of it. That Apple TV 4K remote can send out IR commands. If it detects that it's connected to something with HDMI CEC by default, it doesn't prompt you to do that or anything. But yes, he's got the instructions for you actually use the little puck, the little Apple TV 4K device itself. That's where you point your Anthem remote. So you're not doing the two remotes pointing at each other. You're going to point the Anthem remote at the Apple TV 4K, actual little box, and it can learn the IR command from the original remote. The full instructions of going through the menus are in there because it's not super intuitive. But yeah, Jeremy did a great job, so I'll just let you reference to his video for the exact instructions on the settings to go through there. But yeah, once you learn that command, then your Apple TV 4K remote can send out an IR command for that. It mimics the original Anthem remote, and that's the workaround to get this working.
In yet another one of Gary's setups, he's using a Luxman L550AXII or 2. I don't know what that is supposed to be.
It'll be a 2. Yeah.
Stereo integrated amplifier. It has both RCA and XLR inputs on the back. And last month, he tried connecting his Panasonic UB9000 universal disc player to it using the XLR inputs, but absolutely no sound came out. It worked with RCA connections, though.
Yeah.
We mentioned there was a possibility there might be a setting in the Panasonic player since it has a lot of audio output options. But then he brought his Parasound JC3 Junior phono preamp into the setup, and he knows for sure that its XLR outputs were working perfectly fine in a different setup of his. Once again, there was no sound output from his Luxman and no movement on its VU meters either, but using the RCA connections instead, it played just fine.
Yeah.
So any idea what could have gone wrong with the XLR inputs on his Luxman? He inquired at his local repair shop, and the price just to have a look with no guarantee they'd be able to fix it was a bit of a turnoff, given how much other options Gary already owns and has at his disposal. So he's just curious what we think might have happened, since everything else in the Luxman still seems to be working just fine, but just the XLR inputs no longer produce any signal. Well, no longer indicates that they were at some point doing it, and nowhere in this question does it suggest that they ever produced any. So, okay, these were not having ever touched this device. I've never looked at the back of it. I have no idea what you're talking about. It has been my experience that there are devices that have physical switches or settings that turn on and off RCA and XLR and only allow you to use one.
Yeah, certainly like on
other.
Emotiva amplifiers, there's a little switch on the back of, are you using the RCA input or are you using the XLR input? Yep.
That would be my first guess to look at. This, and I think at this point you've extinguished any thoughts that it's the second device that's the problem. It is definitely this device that is the issue. So that would be my first and probably only thing, other than to assume this thing is broken and has always been so.
The only other thing I can think of is that XLR cables do have 3 pins. And not all XLR cables have the pins wired exactly the same. Not all XLR cables are exactly the same. So typically, on the back, if you check carefully, the XLR plugs themselves, although it might have rubbed off by this point, but they're often labeled where it says 1, 2, 3, and it'll be like ground, and then signal, and then neutral. You'll have those 3, and they're very often labeled. But if not, you can refer to the manual or look it up online. And you need to check if the the XLR outputs of, say, the Panasonic player, if those pins are the same as the pin arrangement on the inputs of the Luxman, because they could be different, or you just happen to be using XLR cables that are wired differently, because they can be. That makes sense. One of the other easy things to change is you probably have other XLR cables in your house. Try a different pair of XLR cables, because that could actually be what's going on here.
Yeah, I could see that.
If you're sending the signal pin to ground, you ain't gonna get no sound.
That's right. So if he watches a 2.39 to 1 aspect ratio show on this 55-inch OLED, and then he puts that same 2.39 to 1 show on a 65-inch OLED, how much taller is the image on his 65-inch? Precisely.
Yes, because one thing to know is that the 55-inch OLED, the actual diagonal image size is 54.6 inches. It's a 55-inch class display, but the actual image size diagonally is 54.6 inches. On the 65-inch OLED, it is actually 64.5 inches diagonally. So if we're talking precise, we need to know that first. Then we just use a little bit of Pythagorean theorem, because we know what the diagonal dimension is, to figure out the width of the display, and then we divide the width of the display by 2.39 in either case, and that we get the exact height. So on your 55-inch, quote-unquote, OLED, the width is 47.588 inches, and the height of a 2.39 to 1 aspect ratio image on there would be 19.9113 inches. And then on the 65-inch, it'll be 56.2166 inches wide, and the 2.39 to 1 image height on there will be 25.5216 inches. So the exact height difference is 3.61 inches. I did the math for you, if you couldn't tell. I didn't do all that in my head. I prepared that beforehand. You'll never guess.
Karl just ran into his first major problem with his Kaleidescape system. He was using a Strato S unit, which is now discontinued, a discontinued Kaleidescape hardware model that could act as both a player and a 6 terabyte server with a spinning hard drive built in. He was emailed an alert that the system had detected a hard drive failure and that the Strato S unit would be unable to start until it underwent service repairs. Unfortunately, when he contacted Kaleidescape, they informed him that the repair would not be possible. Karl didn't share specifics, as Kaleidescape will work with him to come up with the best solution to replace the storage and player in his Kaleidescape system. As they will, they will. That's what it says.
Yeah, I mean, it's not done yet, so we don't know what the outcome is,
But it was a bit distressing to find out that this wasn't as simple as just replacing the failed hard drive and re-downloading all the movies that were stored on the original. Thoughts? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
A
this
lot
is
is
my
gonna
problem.
depend.
This is my problem with all systems that, or all products that require you to be locked into their ecosystem, and they're they're not. I mean, even Apple has these issues, and Apple is huge, so it's not like the size of the company that is the issue.
Right.
I mean, I've talked about it numerous times here. But my wife's mom passed away. We bought her an iPad a long time ago, and she could never remember her password, but didn't really need to for the most of it. So when she passed, we got the iPad, took it in to Apple, said, "Hey, we would like to transfer this to us because I physically am holding this thing. Here is the receipt that we have to pay, that shows that we bought this exact model, this one, this, not the serial number, everything is on here. We have it. It is ours. We can show you everything." And they're like, "Yeah, but do you have the password?" "No." "Well, then we can't help you." Yeah. "What do you mean you can't help me?"
Factory reset is the only thing.
And even then, that wouldn't,
Yeah, you'd lose all the stored photos, which is what you were after, right?
It was just after all the stuff, and then eventually got flooded, and now it's dead. But the point is yes, this is a problem. This is a problem with hardware within a specific ecosystem that they eventually stop supporting, and then you're screwed. I mean, or out of a bunch of money trying to fix it. So that's an unfortunate side effect of this. Yes.
The positive spin here is that Kaleidescape is very good at taking care of their customers, especially if you've purchased through a dealer. They are very good at that. In a situation like this, I am not anticipating that what they're going to tell you is buy a new TerraPrime server at full price, buy a new Strato V player at full price. You'll get to re-download your movies, but I doubt that they're going to try to take better care of you than that, because this is a hardware failure that happened on a model that they are no longer repairing for whatever reason, probably just because 6 terabyte hard drives aren't that easy to come across anymore, or ones that would support and work in their system. So there'll be some solution that costs less than just literally buying brand new stuff at full price, but it might not be a $0 outlay that comes out of this, which is unfortunate. Although, hey, when products break down past their warranty period, it's going to cost you some money. It doesn't matter what company it is.
That's just the way it works. Yeah.
That's just the way it goes. Now, the good news is you're not going to lose any of the movies that you purchased. That is a great positive part of Kaleidescape.
Sure.
The movies that you purchased, you will be able to re-download them to whatever new hardware you end up putting into your system. But yeah, there's definitely going to be some time and hassle, and very likely some expense that goes into it. It's an unfortunate thing when hardware breaks down and the hardware is so tied into the system. This isn't like replacing the hard drive in your computer.
Yeah. It would be nice, though, if you could upgrade that drive past 6 terabytes.
Absolutely cannot. They lock those things down in the Kaleidescape system. They are DRM'd up the wazoo.
So on the lighter topic, on average, how many movies would we estimate each of us watches every year out of the house and at a movie theater? Karl and his wife take in 2 to 3 movies a week, so he figures they see around 150 movies a year out at the movie theater. There are 2 or 3 movies a week that come out?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Isn't that all of them? I mean, it feels like that's all of them.
I mean, for a while there, we were getting like 10 to 12, and it's shrunk down a lot. But yeah, we're still getting about 5 on average a week.
Anyways, and then they watch even more at home. A couple of his friends called the Austin Film Society their second living room, and they take in 4 to 5 movies a week out of the house. Lee, you must be able to buy a subscription. It's got to be cheaper to buy a subscription than pay for movie tickets.
Yeah, if you're going to like AMC, you get the A list, the Stubbs A list thing. Yeah.
Lee Overstreet, who I don't know who this is, weighed in to say he literally cannot remember the last movie he saw at the movie theater, and 4 movies a week would be like half his mortgage, which is a complete lie. Shut up, Lee. You're an idiot. I see less than 1 movie a year.
Okay.
The last movie I saw was Dune 2. I have no intention of seeing any movies this year. Not that I'm very excited about the new Captain America movie. I think that there's even the reviews I've seen have not exactly painted the most rosy picture of it.
Sure.
First of all, let's be honest. I am tired of all the negativity on. It's like we've talked about it a bunch here, and I will continue to talk about it. It's very hard for me to pay attention to most movie reviews because they do not get views if they're not negative. So
Sure.
I have one movie reviewer I watch. I don't agree with everything he says, but I watch his because I know that he's as geeky as I am, maybe a little bit more so, and I tend to agree with what he says, even if and he's not afraid to be positive about something.
Good.
He called it a solid B plus. He feels like it's the tail end of these movies that were shot. When in the middle of COVID, when they had to do a bunch of reshoots now, and they've changed the direction because of what's his name getting fired, and maybe he's not fired. I don't know what's going on with that. I hope he's still fired, but whatever. And I would. He's like, yeah, it's a good movie. And I've liked all of the Captain America movies a lot. So I'm excited to like this one as well. So, yes, I'm still not going to the theaters to see it, though. It's not a chance. But go on.
I think if I averaged mine out, it would come out to about once a month. There are some months where I have seen 0 movies and then other months where I've seen 2 or 3. But I think on average, it's about 1 a month for me. So I think about, 10 to 12 movies a year I see out at the movie theater. That's about it for me.
I will tell you that right before my first child was born, my wife and I went on like a movie. We're like, we're not going to be able to go to the movies anymore once this kid comes out. So we went and saw, I think, as many as 2 or 3 movies in a weekend. And that seemed unreasonable. We were living in Los Angeles. Tickets were not cheap, but they weren't as expensive as they are now. And I remember I saw the Eric Bana Hulk movie.
Yes.
And came out with like the world's worst mic. I mean, that's not the world's worst migraine, I'm sure. But I've had a grand total of 2 migraines in my life, and this was the first one. And I was not in a good place for a long time until like the Advil kicked in and fixed it. But I think we saw like a double feature that day, and it was just, I was miserable. So at that point, I was like, that's too many movies. We can't see this many movies. And I haven't done it since. So yes, less than a movie a year. Nelson has a 7.4.4 configuration. He used Room EQ Wizard and DSP to achieve the most uniform bass response across the seats as he could. And then he used the Audyssey Editor app and his Denon X3600H to create the bass target curve that he wants. He always feels like it could maybe use some further tweaking, but it's pretty all right. He enjoys the way his theater sounds when he gets to play at full blast. But late at night, his family and neighbors don't appreciate full blast playback levels. So he's been wrestling with the idea of using Audyssey dynamic volume to keep the loud explosions and crescendos under control. While activating dynamic EQ mess up his careful manual calibration, though. And is there an easy way to flip back and forth between dynamic volume on and dynamic volume off so that he can do an A/B comparison? I mean, you can just switch it on and off. Like,
yeah,
you can just switch it on and off.
It's a few little button clicks into the menu, so it's not quite, instantaneous A/B. And I've got a little workaround that can help you with that. But yeah, I mean, it will slightly alter your EQ.
Sure.
If it was making no difference at all, then you wouldn't hear anything. So yeah, it is slightly altering your EQ. Dynamic volume does automatically and necessarily activate dynamic EQ. Dynamic volume does. You can have dynamic EQ without dynamic volume, but you cannot have dynamic volume without dynamic EQ. So it is still attempting to keep all of the frequencies audible. It's trying to keep all of the frequencies up to the audible threshold, which means it's actually boosting the bass if you turn the master volume down quite a bit. So it will still be boosting the bass to keep it audible, but then it will just keep all sounds at a similar volume level. You're not going to have the wild swings in dynamic range where some things are much, much louder than others. It's going to keep all of that relatively stable, but it is still applying dynamic EQ. So is it altering the manual equalization that you did? Yes. I mean, it is doing some changes to that target curve that you chose in the Audyssey Editor app. But will it mess it up? I don't think so. I think it does a pretty good job of keeping the tone of the sound quite consistent.
I wonder if he means, will it somehow defeat it and like change it to like a different setting? So it keeps all your same EQ. It's not going to change those settings. It's just going to do the compression part of it that you want it to do.
Yeah.
So by default, I mean, by definition, it is changing your EQ, but it doesn't change the settings if that's what you're worried about. Like if you switch it on, it's not going to like zero out everything.
Oh,
and then when you switch it back off, it will have forgotten what you put in there.
Right.
Your EQ stays.
Oh yeah, and
once
you're back to dynamic volume off, it's exactly the way it has always been. There's no like permanent.
If that's
change
what you're worried about.
Yeah, for sure. So the little workaround for if you want to do a more instantaneous A/B comparison, well, your Denon has a quick select setting. It's got 4 quick select memory buttons on its original remote. You can learn those if you're using a universal remote of some kind to whatever other remote you're using. But yeah, you might want to bust out that original Denon remote, and it's got those 4 quick select buttons. So basically what you do is set everything up the way that you want, and then you just press and hold quick select 1, and it will save that configuration to quick select 1. Then in your case, all you're changing is going in there and turning dynamic volume on, since by default you normally have it off. And then you will press and hold quick select 2 and it will save it there. And now you just 1, 2, 1, 2. That's your direct A/B comparison right there. Very, very fast changes.
There you go. Eric really got a kick out of the thorough
This
video
is our exceedingly long going through here. So however much amount of time we want to take, that's what we're going to do.
Okay, with how much time is going on here?
Well, yeah, we got
like 12 minutes or something.
At least
like
until the 2-hour mark, and we'll probably go past 2 hours. But yes.
Right. Okay. So Eric really got a kick out of the thorough video tour that Youthman, which is I don't understand that. Is that their actual name?
No, that's
Youthman?
his handle. That's his handle.
That's a dumb handle. I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
I mean,
it just sounds creepy. I'm sorry.
YouTube channel. And
sounds like somebody's not allowed within 500 feet of an elementary school. That's all I'm going to say. I don't know this person. They're probably very nice. Anyways, Eric got a kick out of the thorough video tour that Youthman posted on his YouTube channel covering the Van Cave home theater in Texas, described as a no-compromise 13.7.8 channel private home cinema. It pisses me off that there's 7 subwoofers in this thing. It just
they have
angers
an explanation,
me.
But yes,
I know they do. Yeah. I don't care. It just my sense of symmetry. Like I have a hard enough time with the 13, but I know
there's a
that
center
it has
channel
to be there for the center channel.
And there's a center channel subwoofer. That's where the 7 came from.
I understand where it comes from. I hate it. Anyways, he just wanted to geek out over it, so he's really interested to hear our color commentary and just our overall reaction to it. There's a fair build book freely available that details some of the plans and follows the construction from beginning to end. It's a PDF. And if you're interested, we'll have a link on.
It's like 55 pages, but much of it is photos. Yeah,
it is photos. There's a lot of photos. You can skim. But it will be confusing to you because it was confusing to me, and I know what the heck I'm looking at.
Sure.
It was brand new construction, and the owner, Robert Van Man, again, these names.
That is not a nickname or anything.
That is his real name.
His name is Van Man.
I'm sure. Again, I'm sure he's a very nice man. It's just a weird last name, and it's not his fault, unless he picked it. Wanted to correct the shortcomings of the home theater he had in his previous home. The main thing was that he wanted to be able to blast 120 dB playback levels with infrasonic bass at any time, day or night, without the rest of the house hearing so much as a peep. So for those of you who are like, I just want to soundproof my home theater, but on the cheap, this is what the cheap looks like.
And by the way, I'm showing some images from the book as we're going along, but if you don't want to try and make out in our horrible 720p resolution, we'll just have the link to the PDF because it's freely available book. Just get the PDF yourself. I'm not going to put each of these individual photos into our Flickr album. There's no point when you can just get the whole book that we're looking at.
So in Eric's estimation, this is the most overbuilt thing he's ever seen, and indeed it is described how the design cost for the theater alone exceeds the design cost of the entire rest of the house during the planning phases. The builder said it was like constructing a separate spaceship that just happens to share one wall. So it's on the exterior. It's kind of on the exterior of the building. The structural foundation and exterior walls of the theater ended up enclosing over 15,000 cubic feet of in volume with an A-frame roof and a massive steel support structure. The foundation for the theater is 30 inches lower than the rest of the house to allow for the completely decoupled floating construction within. So the foundation is lower so that the room within the room can have its floor in line with the rest of the house.
That's right. Yes.
That's so that you understand what's happening there. The completely decoupled floating floor had to be reinforced with kinetic pads throughout, but with enough support for what ended up being 4,000 pound front baffle wall and stage. Some of this I don't understand why they did it the way they did it, but whatever.
That's exactly what Eric wants to hear about. He's like, he wants our color commentary.
The ceiling was a massive undertaking to fully suspend it from the A-frame structure without it physically touching any other part of the construction. As we'll get into, the theater has been described as being a room within a room within a room. The internal floating floor, walls, and ceiling ended up creating an air volume of about 8,700 cubic feet. And in the final finished look, all Canadian maple wood with stretched fabric walls creates what appears to be a 5,500 cubic foot space, basically only a third of the actual structural space that was built. So, with that basic understanding of the sort of construction and room we are dealing with, Eric is eager for us to make our way through the Van Cave build book and provide our commentary on what we think about the whole project and the results. Okay, so for those of you that are just kind of wanting the too long didn't read version of this, when you talk about trying to, I want to put some acoustic panels on my wall so that my subwoofers don't bother my neighbors. The budget for this room was $500,000.
Initial budget
was $500,000, and it exceeded this almost immediately.
Yes, and then by the end, they didn't say the final figure, but it was like 3 to 4 times that cost by the end of things. Yeah.
So, if you think, and I almost got in an argument with the guy I work with at the bike shop the other day because I was like, I got some acoustic panels, which I talked about at the top of this podcast. And I'm like, they don't really reduce noise, but they reduce ringing. And he's like, well, so they reduce noise. I'm like, no, they don't.
Like not from room to room.
Yeah. And I'm like, it would not seem less loud to you. It's just the sound doesn't last as long in the room. So it reduces sound. I'm like, no, it doesn't. But, whatever. So when we talk about building a room within a room and doing all these things, you're like, how much can I do? And I did kind of go off on that poor questioner who asked about his bass shakers. How can I do this on the cheap? Well, you can either do it or you can not do it and not spend as much money, but you'll never do it on the cheap. It is not cheap to do this. And it's, in the range of $1 to $1.5 million to do it the way that they did it. And when you look at and I have to click on this thing, when you look at the actual, it takes a second, the actual room itself and all the stuff they had to do. Yeah. And not only that, but like the measurements from outside the room and how quiet it is. First of all, it's still not fully done. It's not like there's no sound out there. It's measurable. So those of you that care more about,
care more about 0 dB. Okay. All right.
Yeah. There's not like zero sound that comes through the structure of the house and into this room. It's imperceptible. You don't hear it, but you can measure it and it exists. So if that's what if you're like, well, I only care about the measurements, well, then you'll never get there. You build a house someplace else and go visit it, because that's how you'll have to have your home theater.
Just so we're synchronized, you and I, Tom, I'm starting on about page 6 here, which is going back a little bit from what I've showed. But yeah, this is like starting there on the floating floor construction. I just wanted to make a comment as we get to, I think it was page 8. Yeah, so they're showing there the isolated wall, but they do only have one shared wall. I mean, this is basically its own fully dedicated room. This is the theater room, and this is not in the middle. It's not like underneath the garage in the basement. Like, this is completely separate structured room, but it does share one wall with the house. So it's kind of interesting. I'm just going through a little bit here of the pages, and I'm going to get to where they talk about it being a room within a room within a room. Because when I first heard that, that was one of the earlier things that was said in the video that Youth Man posted there when they were going through this whole thing. It's like an 1.5 hour long video as they tour this thing.
Yes, it's long.
But when they very first described this idea of room within a room within a room, I was like, Oh, actually, that threw up a red flag for me, because there is this thing called a triple leaf effect, which is you have, a structural wall on the outside, you have the finished wall on the inside, but if you put another wall in between those two things, you can actually create new resonances within the cavity of the wall that you want to avoid. You want to knock down any resonances in between two parallel surfaces. You don't want to have the triple leaf effect, but that is not really what was going on here. When they're talking about room within a room within a room, there is the full foundational structure on the outside of this thing. Then there is a complete physical detachment with basically isolation pads and hangers and all types of things to reduce any chance of physical vibration being conducted to that structural layer. Mm-hmm. But then they have the actual physical structure where like the drywall finish is going to be. That's layer number 2. Layer number 3 of the so-called room within a room within a room is not in any way structural. It is a stretched fabric system. And then this maple wood finishing, that's part of the, the actual visual finish on the inside. But that's not in any way interfering with the acoustics of it, right? It's mostly stretched fabric that's going on there. So I can see how they're saying that's like a third layer. It's like visually it's another layer. That's the third layer that's going on there, but it's not acoustically another layer. So I was happy to see that. Now, of course, they're going like above and beyond in the construction of this thing, this isolated subfloor, this completely hanging ceiling, everything insulated within. And it could be argued that since the one shared wall, I think what did they say was 38 inches in depth by the end of the thing?
Yeah.
They had a full it was like a foot and a half of concrete is the actual structural thing, but then they have completely isolated building on either side of that foundational thing. So it was like 36, 38 inches deep by the end of it. And that is to try
I'm just looking at the door right now about this like walkway where they have this big metal looking.
What page is that, so we can start catching up?
I am on 17.
Okay, so I'm a little ways away from there, but we've seen these pages before as I'm paging through it, and you can follow along in the PDF for yourself. But yeah, I mean they've
16,
got
17.
Yeah, the full diagrams there where you're seeing what this structure actually is. So I mean, like I don't have much in the way of criticism. Naturally, this is not an expense that most people would be able to afford and go through, but it is not as overbuilt as I was imagining from the first description of it being room within a room within a room. This is actually very much tried and true, well-tested, well-documented construction. I could make the argument of there is nothing above this theater. They don't have another floor above this theater. It's an A-frame roof. It's going to the outside. The 3 exterior walls, like that, you don't have sound that, but they didn't want to hear a peep. They wanted to be anywhere outside of this theater and not hear a peep. So, I could make the argument that the ceiling construction maybe didn't have to be this extensive because you don't have a room above this theater. The exterior wall construction, I'm like, for any normal purposes, just the regular foundation wall would be enough. And then you're going to have a finish inside of it. It's not like you're going to have exposed brick and concrete or whatever it is as your 3 walls. You're going to have a finish inside of it. And then if you want a stretched fabric system over that, you're going to end up at something similar without it being quite as overbuilt as that. The main wall that counts is the one that is structurally attached to the rest of the house. But the techniques themselves, even though they did it on all 6 surfaces, the techniques themselves are tried and true, and a huge thumbs up to that. So yeah, I think the next part of it was the door itself, right? You've got a double door system with a space in between, an antechamber, an airlock chamber in between. And these are crazy, crazy expensive, massive 550-pound doors that were installed on this. Like they said, these were actual outright vault doors. That's what they are. They are like bank vault doors installed in this thing essentially, and then trimmed out lovely in this maple wood to make them look like normal interior doors, but they are not normal interior doors inside. But that is the other part of this, making sure that what is connected to the rest of the house is not going to make a peep. But yeah, tried and tested stuff. I was pleasantly surprised in a way that it wasn't more overbuilt than this.
Right. So as much as the construction does cost, I mean, what really, when we look at these big numbers, a lot of this is not in the sound isolation that they're going for.
Yeah.
A lot of it's just in the fit and finish.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
we're talking about, this, and it's almost the first thing he talks about on that video, because I watched the beginning part of the video. He's talking about how everything's finished in maple, and maple is really hard to stain, and it's got 6 layers of this, or
I think it was more than 6 layers of that, and they because they wanted it to all match as well as possible. Like, they wanted all of the wood to be from the same family. They purchased 2 seasons worth of an entire orchard in Canada of this maple wood.
I got the impression from him that wasn't that they wanted it all to be from the same family as much as it was they wanted to make sure they had enough wood.
Yes,
because the 1 season's worth of wood was not going to be enough
from an entire
to do all the
orchard.
Wood.
That's right.
So he's just like, we'll just buy it all.
Yes.
We'll just pre-order it all. We'll order everything you have now, and then everything for next year, and then that should be enough.
Van Cave Theater sign and proscenium, that was all completely custom made.
Yeah.
Because they couldn't find
and I
anything.
like how he talked about how we talked to some people who had unreasonable costs for this.
That's right.
What's unreasonable to you?
It's up there. It's well beyond unreasonable.
Well,
to me.
I bet that's not the case though. It's really weird how people will drive up to a store in a $150,000 car and then try to argue with you about how much a gum should cost or something. You're like, what are you talking about? They value things differently. So to him, this could have been done on the super cheap, because he's like, I don't think that this should cost that much, and I've just decided that arbitrarily, and here it is. And so let's. We're gonna.
I want to get to the HVAC system next, but just before we get there, I did just want to mention, it was crucial that they had extensive planning. Like they said, this was at least a 5-year project, and honestly, it was probably underway before that. But it was crucial in the planning because, once that floating floor is down, you are not tearing up this entire theater to do something underneath the floating floor structure. So they had to know what equipment was going in here beforehand, because they're like, the front sound stage, we're going to have a whole baffle wall, we're going to have a whole stage up front. And they had to know what was there, because they figured out this thing is going to weigh 4,000 pounds. So we can't just have the exact same amount of support under this entire floating floor in this theater. We have to have it be able to support this 4,000-pound front wall that we're putting in there. So the planning was absolutely critical and crucial. But that one of my little criticisms when we get towards the end is going to involve that as well. So we're on to page 19 now. We're looking at the HVAC system. I'm not sure if you had any thoughts on that. This is one of my favorite parts, honestly. The HVAC is one of my absolute favorite parts.
They specifically talk about how they made it so that there was plenty of air, the amount of air that could come in and out wasn't about
circulation.
Because remember, this is an airlocked room. It is by itself. You need to get air circulating in and out of this thing. So what they did is they used a lot of very thin, very long openings. So that the air could pass in and out without you hearing that whoosh as it came in. And plus they did a bunch of other stuff with it's got its own system. Let's just start with that.
It's completely separate HVAC from the rest of the house. It is not tied. This is its own separate building. It just happens to share a wall. That's all it is. Yeah.
Which is kind of funny. Why even bother?
I know. Just build a
little walkway.
People have separate detached garages, so just have a separate detached theater.
Seems like that would have just been cheaper than doing all this. You wouldn't have had to do all that.
Didn't seem like it was lacking for acreage. So
really. So they did a bunch of stuff with the ducts and and all of that to make sure that the noise was inaudible. But I think the big thing is just that they just had a lot of square footage or inches.
But when they talked about the flexible ducting that was of course used, and then just the sheer length of it with the number of turns in there so that they could have absolute silence, that puts a real strain on your HVAC system. Having extra long ducts with lots and lots of bends in them, that's never going to be the recommendation from your HVAC professional for efficiency, right? That's never going to be what they say if you want the most efficient system. But when sound is the number one priority, this had to be a massively overbuilt. So again, a tremendous amount of the planning had to go into this HVAC. That's probably one of my favorite parts, honestly, in this whole thing.
Right.
So moving
then,
on, yeah.
Yeah, moving then, he's got his and I don't quite understand why this is the way it is.
This is one of my criticisms here. This speaker mounting solution. So they have these 1,000-pound frames that were created that they screwed into the speakers. So I mean, forget about the finish of the original finish of the speakers. He was basically saying like they wanted to make the enclosures of the speakers as if they were 1,300-pound enclosures. And I mean, why?
This is what I don't understand.
So, I mean, we can just say he used JBL synthesis speakers.
Yes.
JBL, especially in their synthesis series, their absolute flagship series, where they're applying all of the research that Harman has done over the years. They do the full in an anechoic chamber spinorama measurements. They are not missing some kind of output from the cabinet of the JBL synthesis speakers that was overlooked. Because they only took, some company only took a single microphone measurement from directly in front of the speaker, and you're worried that there's a resonance in the cabinet that wasn't known about. Somebody missed it. You have to beef up the cabinets to get rid of it. Not the case in JBL synthesis. The 5 JBL synthesis subwoofers that they installed in this system are themselves 380 pounds, something like that. Like they didn't skimp on the cabinets of these speakers. So if we're then talking about, okay, well, I was worried about transference of energy to the stage that was being like, why was the stage 4,000 pounds? Well, it's because they have these 1,000-pound racks that they're putting these speakers into. To me, this is where this room is the most unnecessarily overbuilt, because once they had all of that, he went to the trouble of sourcing industrial, like for industrial equipment, right? Like you go into an industrial laundromat, and this is what they're using, sorbethane donuts, to make sure that you put these now 1,300-pound speakers on top of these sorbethane donuts, and it's as if they're floating on air. Like you can nudge them with a finger and they actually move, right? So, like, yes, so I don't mind the sorbethane. I don't mind the sorbethane donuts. That's great. They're decoupled, right? We're not going to have any vibration that is coming from these JBL synthesis speakers is not going to transfer into the structure, which is already itself floating above the foundation. So we're double decoupled. We're double damped. But you didn't need the frames. I'm sorry. You didn't need them. I'm going to go on record, even though this is a multi-million-dollar company that did the installation, and clearly either a multi-millionaire or a billionaire who, built this house. This didn't need to be done. I'm going to put my neck on the line and say that part didn't need it.
I don't think your neck is very much on the line. I think that's just science. So, okay. So what they say here is, if isolation wasn't important, rigidly bolting the speakers to the floors or walls to prevent the cabinets from moving would provide the best speaker performance. And I'm just like, no.
Right.
This is not a necessary thing.
Yeah.
Especially, okay. So what you're hearing here and what you're seeing here, this is the cost of essentially misinformation. This is the cost of people believing things that they read online or in the forums, or listening to other people who they view as experts but aren't experts. So they this information is outdated, it's old, we know it's not true, and you know it's not true because you did this whole thing just to decouple it anyways, and so it's all pointless. So you rigidly bolted it to something very heavy and then decoupled it anyways. Well, you didn't have to do it. You could have just decoupled it to begin with.
The decoupling I'm totally on board with. I love that part of it. But yeah, my next criticism of it was not that it's like an actual criticism on a performance level or anything like that.
Sure.
But this baffle wall that they designed, we're getting up to around page 25 here now. Like, that's great. It's just my little bit of criticism here is you can never change this without tremendous cost.
Yes.
Like, to me, since we know that we're going to have acoustically transparent everything, covering everything that's behind these things, acoustically transparent screen, acoustically transparent stretched fabric walls, it's like, you, especially someone with this type of money on hand and who is clearly into home theater this much, you might want to add additional speakers or change a speaker, or like, what if you want, in an Atmos setup, you can have, you can have 7 speakers just across the front soundstage. Like, what if you want to make a change? This is so built in This is so designed. Like, what I would have done instead is have a frame structure back there, shelving essentially, that can accommodate whatever speakers I want to put there, whatever acoustic treatment I might want to put there, whatever subwoofers I might want to change out. I would have a structure built behind my acoustically transparent screen and my stretched fabric walls. I would for sure have the structure, but I would leave it a little bit more, the ability to change it. This is so customized, so built in, that to change this is going to be tremendously expensive. Now, obviously, budget is not a gigantic concern, but I don't know anybody, even billionaires, who, want to spend more than they have to on that type of thing. So I might have just made this easier to change in the future.
Yeah, I can see that. And, the idea here, if I remember, is that, they're worried about angling these speakers and blah, 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 which, of course, my take on that. I am not...
well, especially since they aimed all 13 speakers and the 8 overhead speakers at one listening position. They looked at the Dolby diagram and said, "We're doing that.
We're doing that." That's where it goes. And to do that, to not. I mean, these are JBL synthesis speakers.
To defend it, it kind of doesn't matter where you point these JBL speakers, because they are so wide dispersion that you can aim them all at one seat and you're still going to have great dispersion at the other seats. And actually, the other thing that I wanted to give kudos here is that as massive and built as this room is, it's 8 theater seats themselves, and then 4 more like bar stools basically at the very back. So
they didn't care about. They don't even measure at those.
They didn't go crazy overboard on the seating arrangement in this theater. That I kind of want to give kudos to, because it would have been tempting to build a 30-seat theater or something like that, and they didn't do that.
But that front rows of seat has like a 62-degree field of view on this stupid screen, which I'm just like, whoa.
But the other thing that really kind of threw me for a loop was like the planning that went into that front wall. It's obvious, it's evident. You can just look at it and know that a tremendous amount of planning went into that. And then that affected the planning for the entire room being built, because they knew it was this 4,000-pound baffle wall at the front. But then it's not that they cheaped out on the installation of all the rest of the speakers. They custom built backer boxes, and hooray, backer boxes! Like, woohoo! Yeah. They did backer boxes, custom built them. But the attachment method of all the other speakers, I'm like, this is not decoupled. This is not wildly damped and decoupled. Like, how did you not wildly damp and decouple all the other? It's not that they're like, I don't have a criticism on a performance level. They didn't need to be. But then neither did that front wall need to be what that front wall ended up being, when you understood that all the other speakers in this room don't have to be put into new 1,000-pound enclosures and then floated on sorbethane. It's like, no, you already floated the entire room. So it was a little strange to me that it was like, to the extent that they went on the front wall, and then it's not that they cheaped out in any way on the others. They did exactly what should be done with all the other speakers, but then went so overboard on the front speakers. That was a little bit weird to me.
And the fact that they're the rest of the room, the speakers are kind of just hidden behind
stretched fabric
and whatever's there, means that they could change out the rest of the speakers fairly easily.
That's
it's
right.
just the front wall that everything is built in for some reason.
And I mean, maybe that's why they went to that extent, because you're like, look, I am never changing this front wall. So
I would definitely change that front wall. I think those speakers are too close together. I'll be honest with you.
Right.
I mean, they are fairly wide apart, because the screen itself
is a huge screen, 192-inch
screen.
screen that we're going to get to in a second here.
Yeah, it's very big, but it's still just so... I mean, I wouldn't have done it this way, but this is just me.
But now we're getting to page 30 here. This is the acoustic treatment, and here I kudos as well, even though, a whole bunch of diffusion, but these are mostly combo panels. They actually have insulation behind them, and then diffusion scattering plates on top. But this is one, they didn't overdo it. They said, full acoustical analysis was done in here, and they weren't aiming for a dead sounding room. He specifically did not want a dead sounding room, like a completely padded cell sounding room. Which is why it was easy to sell them on diffusion. But honestly, the acoustic treatment in here, I think, other than I probably wouldn't have had as many diffusion panels in here, I just would have had some areas that had thinner absorption because it would be cheaper and easier. But I actually really like the acoustic treatment planning that was laid out in here. It's very, very sensible. A lot of attention was paid to the ceiling in here because you have this tremendous height above this. Visually, it looks big already and it's arched visually, but then you have a huge amount of space above the ceiling, which acoustically is a great thing. But yeah, a lot of attention paid there, but they didn't go wildly overboard on that. So kudos there as well.
Yeah, and the funny thing is, if you look at this, and I'm trying to figure out what I guess the I don't know, tan parts, is that what the color that is? I don't know what color that is.
Those
Peach?
are the absorbers, yeah.
Those are the absorbers, and the other ones are the diffusers.
The blue is the diffusion, yeah, or combo.
Yeah. And if you look at it, you're like, huh. It's just kind of slapped around everywhere is what it kind of looks like. They kind of put it where they could. And
I suppose so much is built in. The speakers are so built in. And then the cherry wood finish was a priority, so it has to go around that. Yeah.
Yeah. So you kind of look at this and you're like, oh, I mean, they did modeling, or they say they did modeling or whatever. But the reality is that it's just kind of everywhere.
It's a little bit more about percentages, which that's not a criticism from us. That's the way we would do it too.
That's exactly the way we would do it.
Yeah.
So that's one of the things that really got me. And again, I think that this is people think you need diffusion.
Right.
They have been sold on diffusion,
and it just
as
looks
being a
different,
thing,
right? Even though everything is hidden behind stretched fabric in this case, so who cares what it looks like?
And they know it's making a difference. I bet. I mean, and we'll get to this towards the end here a little bit more in more detail. But if you were to take, how long have we gone?
Yeah, we're already at almost 2 hours and 20 minutes, so we need to
wrap this thing up. So if we took this entire theater and I was able to strip out everything behind the fake walls, I bet I could get something that sounded just as good.
Sure.
For a fraction of the cost. Sure. And he and his friends and everybody else would have no idea that I had changed anything.
Yeah, if you could somehow do an A/B comparison, that'd be fun.
I bet if you could flip a switch and go between the two theaters, I bet that sonically, a lot of what is done in this room, including all the amplification and the ridiculousness and the infrasonic subs and everything else that we haven't gotten to, I could make it sound just as good. Now the projector. I mean, the screen's
projector's up next. I was a little bit interested here, and this is sort of the result of it having been a 5 years ago process. Yeah. So I mean, again, completely isolated hush box that's installed in here. Yes. There's
very important.
Some time spent on the exact glass that they chose for the window for the projector. Yeah. No, I mean that is all stuff that, if I had the money, I would do that too. So no criticism there. I wouldn't demand that anybody else do it, but I was interested that they ended up with a Sony VW5000 because that's a little bit older model now. It is what preceded the GTZ 380. So I have little doubt that Robert Vanman has probably upgraded to the GTZ 380 already at this point. That is slightly more expensive than what the 5000 was, but I was a little bit surprised that it was a Sony 5000 going in there and not something wildly more expensive or more powerful for a 192-inch screen. But speaking of which, that was a Seymour Screen Excellence, 194-inch screen. Sorry, I've been misspeaking here. And Seymour Screen Excellence, they do not do the frames in sections. The entire frame comes assembled. So he had this massive crate that he ordered like 2.5 years in advance, and it sat unassembled in its crate for 2 years while the theater was being finished. So good that it worked out. The other comment I had, he went for a 16:9 aspect ratio. Huzzah! And of course this has motorized masking, but only top and bottom motorized masking. I was a little bit surprised on that. So great. He you know what? He must like the IMAX features that stretch and fill the entire height, and didn't want 16:9 to be smaller when it goes to those IMAX sections. So there we go.
There you go.
Do you have any comments on those before we move on to the calibration part? Because I definitely had something to say on the calibration.
Go on.
So just mention, I mean, it's in the video, it's in the write-up as well. So they went with the JBL Synthesis Pre-Pro, which is based on the Trinov. It's the Trinov Altitude 32, but then with JBL software. So we're seeing the multiple microphones being used simultaneously because they are using the Arcos system that JBL Synthesis offers
facing
there.
forward for some reason, which is a little bit bizarre.
Yeah. Although That's probably correct in their system because
I was going to say that, when we talk about this, we're always like, point your mic straight up, blah blah blah. But these are different mics,
and it's also JBL Arcos it's a brute force trial and error system. So it kind of doesn't matter where your omnidirectional mics are positioned because it is going to measure over and over and over until it gets it right. So, but yeah, the comment that was made was just that. When they first fired up the system prior to calibration, they were a little bit disappointed with the sound.
Yeah.
Which my comment on there was, that's because I don't agree with the way they did the subwoofers, which we're going to get to in a moment. We're going to have comments on there. But almost all of it were like, it's because I don't agree with what you did with the subwoofers. Now, Arcos wrangled everything. Trinov wrangled everything, which I'm not surprised at. But yeah, just a little... preview there for the subwoofer comments. So Tom already mentioned the quiet room testing results, and yeah, you had a comment there because we had to laugh at what was actually making noise inside of this room.
Right. So I don't remember what was making noise. Oh, the infrasonic subs.
Yes, the subwoofers have their own amplifiers built in. They are not separated out like all the other amplifiers are, and so that kind of ruined. It's not ruined in any way, but 100% of the noise inside of this theater came from the amplifiers that were built into the infrasonic subs.
The fans. The fans in the infrasonic subs was what's creating the most amount of noise in this room.
That's right.
So the thing that's creating the sound that you cannot hear is creating a sound that you can hear.
That's right.
In case you're wondering.
There's your hum.
I spent thousands and thousands of dollars for a thing to make noise in my room that I don't want to be in my room.
Yeah.
And the other noises that it makes that I do want to be in my room, I can't hear.
Yes.
So not the best expenditure of money in my opinion, but this is okay. So let's just quickly go back to our friend who was building the theater or dealing with the theater in the ski lodge, which is not a ski lodge, it's a big room. And we said, hey, you need to offset, give this to somebody else. You need to give this, you need to subcontract this because this is somebody else's problem. And, you got to, this part, you can see very clearly in this design what parts came from the guy himself and what he believed.
Sure.
And this is part of it. Now, did the subcontractor, the person who designed this, did they sell him on infrasonic subs? Maybe. I don't know. Because it could very well be that they believe that infrasonic subs make a big difference. And this whole write-up here, they're like talking about how tactile the bass is because of the subwoofers and the infrasonic subs. And the implication, though, in the way the sentence is structured, is that the infrasonic subs were the ones that were really creating that impact, and, which is the belief.
Youthman says that too, directly from his own mouth. How I love the infrasonic subs, and they were watching Dune 2, and how much of a difference they made. Now, those infrasonic subs are playing from 25 hertz down only. That's where the crossover is. And I'm going way back just to show the image, but both of the infrasonic subs, Ascendo infrasonic subs, they are at the front of the room. They are in the front two corners of the room. There are no more infrasonic subs at the back of the room.
Who cares where you put them? Put them in a different room.
Well, yeah, the argument has been made that at wavelengths that low, when you're limiting them to 25 hertz and down, that the waves are so long that you're escaping the modal region on the other end of things. But that is not true. You can have multiples in the room. Because it's going back and forth. So you can still have standing waves. It is not a standing wave that went from the front of the room to the back of the room and then doubled up on itself as it came back, because that distance is not long enough even in this room size. But you can have a wave that went front of the room to the back of the room to the front of the room and then part way towards the back again. And that's the moment it doubles up on the wave that is just being generated. Now you can still have standing waves at these infrasonic frequencies. So the notion that you're only going to do a two subwoofer setup at the two front corners of the room, that is misguided. That is misunderstood. But then more than that, like every description that was going on about the tactile sensations and that, I was like, that was all in an IMAX theater that didn't have infrasonic subs. That all existed, and the kick you in the chest stuff is not happening below 25 hertz. It's in 40 to 60 hertz region. So, I mean, are these contributing something that's not only audible, but actually tactile, sensation, feelable? Yes, that is being contributed. But why did they need the fifth subwoofer? Well, they needed like it was problem when they were modeling it, and it was a problem when they were measuring it. It's like, well, we're still getting interactions from subwoofers that didn't need to be there, and they caused a problem. And then also, again, an indication that this was from 5 years prior. Why isn't this waveforming? Again, we can't change this front wall now. This is a guy who can afford waveforming. He's got a processor that supports waveforming.
Yeah.
He can't do waveforming now unless he spends hundreds of thousands of dollars to rip out the 4,000-pound front wall to put a waveforming system in here. And he'd have to redo the back wall as well. That's one of the reasons I was like, make this something that can be changed. There should be
scaffolding behind here. And,
scaffolding, yes, that's right.
You know what I mean? That's what it should be, so that you can make any changes that you want. That's the way I would have designed it.
That's right. So skipping right towards the end, he put, what did they say? It was 400 feet of LED light streaming behind the fabric walls so that he can turn those on. He can see what's hidden behind those fabric walls. But when we see that, we can see that back wall. It's like that's a thoroughly aesthetically built back wall. The projector is hidden back there behind its glass. There's lots of maple wood on that back wall. It's like, yeah, you can't really put a waveforming subwoofer array into that back wall there. Like, you would have to tear the whole thing out, hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars to change what's going on there. So yeah, I mean, to me, that's just the interesting side of, so much planning, so much expense, wonderful, beautiful work that's been done.
Oh yeah,
but
it's gorgeous.
It really is kind of one-time work. Like, you're going to have to spend a significant portion of what it cost to make this room to make any changes, and something like waveforming comes out and you can't support it. Like, how crazy would that make you? You're a multi-millionaire or a billionaire, and it's like, oh man, it's like, here's this waveforming thing, and now I can't do it. It's like, that would drive me absolutely bonkers.
Yeah, and I mean, I make a lot of arguments about how, $1,000, 1,000 watts per channel in here, and, it's like bridged 2-channel amps for each speaker. And,
well, there was one though, because they did have a list, right? Let me see if I can go forward here. There's some shots of the rest of the house too, where all of this maple wood went in there. So I mean, an amazing house. But yeah, I mean, like, the equipment that was selected, here's where I'm like, expensive stuff, but not nearly the sort of exorbitant prices that could have been paid to go in here. So JBL synthesis, not cheap stuff, but the performance is top notch. You're not going to hear any criticism from me from choosing JBL synthesis in a theater of this sort of size and budget. Like I said, I was a little surprised at that Sony projector, that precise model, but I'm sure he's probably upgraded to a GTZ 380 by now. But the amplifiers, ATI amplifiers, right? Like, rock solid, awesome performance. Are they cheap? No, but are they the most expensive amplifiers you could have easily been sold on to go into an installation like this? No, not anywhere close. Like, the ATI amplifiers are all about performance. They're not about looks or being esoteric in any way. Rock solid performance. So I was really impressed by a lot of the equipment that was selected here, because it is performance-based selections that went into here. I'm not actually familiar with Taurus Power. That was done for all of the surge protection and power protection. I'm not familiar with Taurus Power, so I don't know one way or the other on there. But yeah, he's got a Mad VR, but that makes sense with a Sony 5000. Yeah. It makes a ton of sense with a Sony 5000. You really can get the most out of there. I mean, it's hilarious. What does he have for disc playback? An Oppo. Like, that's what you got. You get an Oppo. It is still the best. He's still got an Apple TV 4K in here, because he does want streaming services, and Apple TV 4K of all things is the best solution, and that's what he went for there. So yeah, a whole bunch of companies that worked on this and contributed to it. So we'll put those names up there because they deserve that credit. But I mean, we've got a shot of the finished theater on the looking towards the back. So I mean, yeah, it is gorgeous. It is wonderful, and it's funny because I mean, look, who are we to criticize honestly what's going on here? But that was what Eric wanted from us. He wanted the color commentary, and it's like. There's a ton of things. He have
spent a lot less on this.
Sure.
I mean, there's a lot. You can make a lot of arguments for how he could do it, and the easiest one would be don't share a wall. Just put a little walkway that you can make it look like a hallway, but just put a walkway and isolate that hallway.
Yes, yeah,
and then. Then build an entire house over it.
Funnily enough, as much money obviously went into this, it's like there are kind of like weird like zoning issues and like code things that can come up. So maybe that's why it like needed to. I mean, you throw enough money at something and you could build another domicile on your land, but sometimes that really is a problem to do that sort of thing. Mainly it's the time, right? You have to get the permits and you have to get the approvals for those types of things. So it could have been something
5 years.
like that. That's true. But yeah, on the flip side, here's us saying here are things that we can point out that where money could have been saved. But on the other side, the kudos I want to give is somebody like this potentially could have been convinced to spend way more.
A lot more, yes.
Because certainly
more expensive speakers, more expensive amplifiers, more expensive cables, more like
exactly.
There's not even a talk of cables.
There's no talk of cables. That's right.
And that's unheard of.
But given all the other equipment that this man chose, I strongly doubt that he went for crazy, esoteric, overpriced cables. Although who knows? But
overall, a few you can be forgiven to have a few beliefs that you're like, I think I would rather have the infrasonic subs, even though I hear that maybe they don't make that much of a difference, but I would rather have them than not.
Sure.
And that way, if they do make a difference, great. If they don't make a difference, I can't hear it anyways, and I've got the money to burn.
Yeah.
Overall, I think this. As a whole, I believe that this thing has been well designed. I think that it's been well executed.
Yes.
I think that while there's always ways that you could make an argument that you could have saved a little money, I think the vast majority of the money that was spent on this place was either spent because of aesthetics, which is personal preference, and I have no opinion on, or you were getting good bang for your buck.
And the other thing was, like, they did say, he wanted to be able to do full concert level, 120 dB, not 105, 120 dB. And there, even with those JBL synthesis subs, like forget about infrasonic, but getting to 20 hertz at 120 dB, you can make the argument that you need some 21-inch subwoofers in a room this size. Because, again, the room looks smaller than it is.
It is, yes.
Yeah, so, it's not necessarily that the Ascendo subs were the wrong choice, but it's just like, obviously, if I'm designing it today, I'm going to have waveforming in this place. And barring that, in a future one, if they ever build another one, it's like, exactly like Tom said, it would be more like a scaffolding structure behind there so that changes can be made. I think that front wall was so over-designed and overbuilt to the point of there is nothing you can do there unless you rip it out.
Yeah. All right. Who do we have left, Rob?
Well, so nothing actually left that came in Sunday or earlier, but I just wanted to let Stefan and Spencer know that I did receive their emails on Monday, so they will be first up next week.
All right. If you want to get your question answered, all you have to do is ask us by emailing us at question@avrant.com. We want to thank our 133 patrons over at patreon.com, and we want to thank Stefan for sending us a note of gratitude. Thank you.
That's right, patreon.com/AVRant podcast if you'd like to sign up to make an automatic monthly donation. So a big thanks to our 133 patrons, and Stefan, thank you for the note of gratitude. We very much appreciate it, and a big thank you to everybody who continues to listen and send in your questions.
For AVRant, I'm Tom Andrew.
And I'm Rob H. Now go out and listen to something.
Want your question answered? Send it to question@avrant.com. This is AVRant.
Now go out and listen to something.